All right, it looks like we're live. So, Mazin, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Awesome. So, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Could you tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel and what you're working on, and who you are?
Um, Sorry, one quick second. My oh, this isn't. So I was where we were trying to. Sorry to everyone. We were trying to um, set it up so that I can stream off of a convoluted way of getting this working, but unfortunately it didn't work. So Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. We'll start this over again. So sorry, repeat one more time.
Mazin, thanks for
Your
coming
intro.
on. Could you tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel and what you're doing and who you are?
So my name is Mazin AbdulAdhim, and so obviously for those on my page that are watching, they already know all this. But I've been a Muslim for I've been in a Muslim. I was born into a Muslim family, but I've been a practicing Muslim for about 20 years. I work with an organization called Hizb Tahrir, and we work to bring about political change in the Muslim lands. But at the same time, we also, while living in the West, we actively have discussions about Islam and to represent Islam properly, and for people to understand the Islamic viewpoint on all sorts of things, including belief itself. And so that's why we're here today.
Cool. I'd love to actually talk with you about politics sometime too, because that's my other interest other than philosophy. So, and your organization looks really cool. So, thanks.
Yeah, for sure,
Um,
anytime.
So just to get started, I am an atheist, by which I mean I don't believe there's any reason to believe in a God. Could you tell me what reasons you believe there are for belief in a God? And then I'd like to tell you my position on those reasons, and then I'd just like to hear your thoughts on my position.
Sure. Now, actually, this is an interesting thing because I know a lot of people who are very involved in atheism debates, and they get very caught up in a lot of jargon and technical terms. And the thing is that if it is true that the creator of the universe designed within us a mechanism to find the fact that he exists, it should be something simpler. Sure, more complicated mind or like more intellectual kind of approaches are fine for the most part, but really it should be something much simpler that most people should be able to kind of reach that conclusion where a simple person can believe in God, and he doesn't have to be some philosophy graduate or somebody who knows the meaning of half a dictionary worth of words. And so I believe that the belief in the existence of the creator of the universe, and that's one of the things actually I want to step away from the word God. The word God is too loaded of a question or too loaded of a word. So I know that, of course, I believe the creator of the universe is God, but without using the word God, I think it's maybe a better word at this point in this discussion to use the word a creator. Because if there is a creator of the entire universe and he created all the atoms and all the molecules and the design of everything, then he is deserving of being called God. Otherwise, there's obviously then the discussion goes in different directions. So that's why I think the topic of a creator is a much more it's much more focused on kind of the direction I'd like to go. And simply put, I mean, and the other thing that I want to clarify is the fact that there are two discussions here. One is the discussion of the existence of the creator of the universe, and the second one is the question of whether or not that creator sent a message, and if he sent a message, how do we know which message is his? And so I think today we're going to be focusing mostly on whether or not there is a creator to the universe, and unless you want to discuss both, what were you thinking?
Well, I was just going to go in whatever direction you wanted to go in. Whatever you think is a compelling argument, we'll start with that. And depending on how far we get into the conversation, we'll just see where it goes.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'll start with just a simple thing. So obviously we can go into much more depth as we continue, but I think that the simplest um, there's essentially in my view there are two very simple evidences that reach the level of certainty that there is a creator for this universe. And number one is the fact that the material that exists in the universe cannot exist in a self-subsisting eternal way. And we're not talking eternal as in let's see if the universe can last forever, but going back in time, obviously. So even in Arabic, there's two different words for it. In English, it's eternal and eternal. In Arabic, it's ezeli and ebedi. Ebedi is eternal in the future, and ezeli is eternal backwards in time. And I think we don't really need to argue too much. I'm not really sure if you, as far as I know, you don't hold the belief that the universe is eternal backwards in time. It has a starting point, right?
Well, I have a complicated response to that. So the first thing is our universe definitely has a beginning at the Big Bang. But physics, as far as we know it, doesn't say that material things can't go back eternally. There's no logical contradiction there. And in modern physics, there's a theory called emergent spacetime being worked on by Nima Arkani-Hammad and Sean Carroll, who show that time, or that there are natural things that can exist outside of space and time, and there are other kinds of time that can exist. So the fact that our universe had a beginning and all of the space and time and matter in it had a beginning, that doesn't mean that it was created by something that's not natural or not made of a different kind of space, time, and matter. So that can all be explained from a naturalistic worldview. We don't need a spaceless, timeless creator to create the universe.
Okay, but at least, so I guess at least the first point is that you believe that the universe has so like so.
So our universe definitely has a beginning, but that doesn't mean that all universes have a beginning, just ours.
Okay, so essentially, you believe that there are multiple universes.
That's the simplest way to explain it. But it's more in depth than that. Like there are different dimensions of time. Like there's Hawking's theory, which there is an extra dimension of time, which he called imaginary time, and there's two-time physics from Itzel Bars, and there's certain other kinds of versions of time, like the A theory of time and B theory of time. So time isn't constrained to just our universe. Our version of time definitely had a beginning at the Big Bang, but there's other kinds of time that can exist before that and independently of the time in our universe. The easiest way to explain that is just say, well, yeah, there could be another universe which is eternal, and our universe was created from that universe, something like that.
Okay, yeah, but I guess the main point that we have to focus on is that we're talking about our universe. So for us to talk about potential theoretical universes, I mean, the thing is that this is nothing more, really nothing more than just a theory that has no evidence for it whatsoever, other than just some sort of idea. Would
Right,
you agree with
I
that?
would agree. Yeah, I would agree, but I'd say that same thing would apply to a god. And so they're both kind of like on equal terms as a starting point, and we could explain the beginning of the universe with a god or a creator of the universe, as you put it, or we could explain it with just a naturalistic explanation like naturalistic pantheism.
So I wouldn't agree that it's the same as the existence of a creator. It's the argument of the existence of a creator is that the creator is naturally is necessarily existent due to the nature of the matter that we see in front of us and how it's organized and its very nature and how limited it is. So obviously I haven't gone into much detail about that, but just initially the what we do know is that or at least our angle, generally as a Muslim, our angle of the perspective of the existence of a creator, it's not based on this idea that it's just blind faith. Like, so we don't have blind faith as Muslims. For us, we know the creator exists because the matter of the universe itself cannot exist without something pre-existing it to bring it into existence. First, in terms of its very nature, because it's not self-subsisting, it's limited, and it has weaknesses, it can break down, it can't just exist on its own. And in terms of the level of organization, it's not possible for the universe to just be at this level of perfect functionality without something to bring it into existence with purpose, essentially. So to say that this is the same as these ideas about multiple universes, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there are multiple universes. There's no indication in this universe that there must be multiple universes. Whereas I'm saying the existence of a creator is necessary due to the nature of the world that we actually perceive directly with our five senses.
Right, I totally agree with you on the necessary point. So there has to be some necessary cause to all contingent things, because the contingent things can't ground themselves. They began to exist and they couldn't have caused themselves to exist. Now, what I'm saying is that the necessary thing could just be a natural phenomenon of the universe that we haven't discovered yet. It's just a natural law of something. Like what I call it is naturalistic pantheism. If you look it up in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you can find a definition there, which is it's just the natural state of affairs. And so there's some natural property of the universe that isn't grounded in a God that is necessary. And our contingent universe is a result of that necessary natural thing.
So the problem that I have with that is you're essentially saying there could be something that is exactly like a creator, but not a creator. Because the thing is, in order for things like eyes to actually exist, like the fact that we have a mechanism within our design of a human being that can detect light and process it properly and make use of it. Also gives us depth of perception with two eyes. It gives us functional color. It gives us all sorts of control over the amount of light that's put through, and so on. And so and I mean, like, there's obviously thousands and thousands of things that we can talk about: the respiratory system, the nervous system, gravity, all these sorts of things that exist. And so what a person naturally comes to, and I can tell from the way that you're discussing, is that you recognize there's an intelligence behind all these things. These things can't just randomly appear. And I'm making an assumption, but I have watched your previous videos, and I can also tell from the way that you're explaining this, is that it's almost as if you're saying that, yes, this and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just kind of making assumptions, but yes, this can't just exist due to randomness, but there must be something that exists that that answers this question without us saying that it is a creator.
Right. So I agree with most of what you said there. So I would say that there is definitely something that's necessary. So that could be described as something that's all powerful or eternal. And so it could just be like an all powerful, eternal, natural universe, bigger than ours or some way, like the multiverse theory or something like that. Now, I wouldn't agree that everything that came about requires an intelligence. I think that all the things we experience, like in the body and the eyes and the respiratory system and all the fine tuning, I think that can be explained due to the fact that the laws, the boundary conditions of the universe, the laws that define them, could be interconnected in some way that if you change one, any of the other ones will be changed in a proportional way. So Steven Weinberg discovered that the weak and the electromagnetic force are the exact same force, and if you change one, you change the other one, so they're actually the same force. Well, my theory is essentially they're all kind of the same force. You can't change any of them to make them different in any way, and so there isn't really a fine-tuning issue when we talk about the larger problems of the universe, because all of the laws are interconnected. And then when we talk about life, the way life is fine-tuned seems to be explained by evolution from my standpoint, where the way that life best functions is a result of random mutation over many different generations and causing changes in the physiological structure and allele frequency in DNA. So from my perspective, both of those things are explained by purely naturalistic means that we don't need an intelligence. But I do agree there has to be something that's eternal, all-powerful, and necessary. It's just not an intelligent something from my perspective.
Yeah, but I guess that's a very strange conclusion to reach, to be completely honest, because the like I said, because this discussion, again, I want to keep things simple, and not go into excessively complex philosophical terminology and ideas. But it's just a very simple thing that, first of all, when it comes to even the idea of there's whether it's multiverse theory or a lot of what you said, none of these things really answer the question about how is it possible for the universe to reach this level of organization and precision. And I know that there's a whole discussion about precision, but I think it's a very simple thing. Like, I believe that it's literally impossible for the human eye to appear without something specifically designing it. It has to be a third person design. It has to be a design by something that knows that light exists and knows how to make a device to detect light. Because if we're going back to the point of the Big Bang, and eyes obviously don't exist at the point of the Big Bang, because even if they did exist, they would have exploded. And so there's no such thing as a light detector. So somehow, when there's this explosion and light just happens to exist, which has its very own rules and regulations, so it's not even asking the question about, well, where did all those rules and regulations for light come from in the first place? But the thing is that for this living creature to suddenly just appear, which life itself makes no sense, by the way, in this universe. Just why does life exist? Absolutely nothing in this. And again, I really firmly believe actually that life shouldn't exist in this universe. It has to be manually inserted into this universe. But aside from that, this little creature starts to grow, and it has no eyes, so therefore it has no capability of knowing that even light exists. So how exactly does a person answer the question that a creature can know enough about light in order to even begin making a mechanism that not only starts to make a mechanism to detect that light, even though it doesn't even know that it exists in the first place, but then it actually, and we're talking about this incredibly soft tissue, somehow becoming absolutely perfect in its practical design for a human being. There's like the fact that there's eyelashes, the fact that again you have just the way that the eyelids work, and there's so many things about the design of the eye. And again, I can switch to talking about the heart. I can switch to talking about the respiratory system, about the blood vessels, about just there's so many details about just the human design on its own, that I don't see any possibility of this taking place without something specifically designing it from external to the being itself, because that being has no capability of knowing any of these things. So how can it even be, whether it's through random mutation or through natural selection? Neither of them answer the question about how these mechanisms can actually even begin to appear.
Well, actually, the biologists asked the same question you did, and we now have a complete understanding of the evolution of the eye from the very beginning. And how it started was you had essentially just skin cells, and the skin cells would absorb light, and that light would then transfer heat into the skin cells, and then give, if the animal moved closer to the light, it would then find food. And so it became more and more sensitive to the light, and eventually it became concave, where it started to bend inward and became more sensitive to light, making the animals easier to find the food. It became more and more bent in, and so it became a little U shape. And then that got filled in with a liquid, a viscous fluid, which made it even more sensitive. And every little stage along the way helped it to find food easier. And so we have a complete description of how the evolution of the eye. And we actually have animals everywhere on Earth where we can see this happening at each stage. So this was actually discovered. Most of the stages were actually theorized by Darwin in his book, The Origin of Species, 100 or so years ago. So we've actually solved the eye problem completely from an evolutionary standpoint. We see every single step. We know it from the beginning to the end of how it evolved.
When you say from beginning until the end, like, can you explain some details of examples?
Well, sure, yeah. So the first thing, like I said, was that eye cells essentially started as skin cells, no different from any other kind of skin cell. And when light hits the skin cells, it gets transferred to heat. And the heat is like a signal to the animal. If it goes towards the heat, it'll find food. So the animals that went towards the heat and became sensitive to this heat and liked it, essentially, survived, while the other animals did not survive. And so the animals that had this more sensitive, resilient to the heat, so they saw the heat and went to it more often because they could feel it. The ones that could feel it easier survived. And so the parts of the skin that were sensitive to light got more sensitive. And those animals survived more, where the animals who couldn't sense it died off. And the more sensitive it became, the more the animals found food, the more the animals reproduced, the more the animals survived. And so evolution caused small changes in this area of the skin cells that could detect light to make it more sensitive. And every increment of making it more and more sensitive started to form what we now see as the eye, where it made it concave. It started to absorb a viscous fluid inside of it. It added a shell to the cornea. It added lashes to make it more, or the eyelids to make it be able to focus more. All of that stuff is defined by evolution. So each individual step, and we can see this in animals all around the world, where we have each individual step mapped out.
So that was just an explanation. That was, but I don't, again, I don't see how two things. So first of all, you don't think that that's a bit of a stretch? So I know that you might find some insects with or some creatures with like, even to suggest that there are creatures with concave non-eyes that are okay. First question is, do you believe that are you saying that there is a creature somewhere on Earth that has a concave, more sensitive area, but that's not an eye, that just is somewhere between detecting heat and detecting light?
Yes, there are snails and worms and all kinds of animals that have that.
And so but still I guess the problem that I'm having is that what I'm saying is that it seems to me that that these types of arguments, they're kind of saying, well, we're at the end and we're trying to find a way to link it somehow to the beginning. But the reality is that for something that for a creature that has absolutely no detection whatsoever of photons, and it's just detecting warmth. And so for that, the next question is, why this particular part of the head? Why not? Why isn't it just skin cells in general? Says, like, on what basis that is this section, and so suddenly the skull starts making room for it all? It's just that it seems to me that these are all very it's just such a stretch. It's just trying to find a way to shove this theory into the theory of evolution, where in reality you have a creature that, and it's not an animal at that point in time. It's just a blob, really, essentially. Or as it's continuing to grow, like who knows if it's, whether it's the theory of it being in the water or just reaching land. But the point is that for it to have absolutely no faculty of detecting something that exists, and all it's detecting is the warmth, at what point, how is it possible that this would just suddenly switch to detecting light? That's what I'm saying, is that it's, and creatures had existed, and because that's the whole problem with this whole thing about and again, we're talking about intelligent design right now, so I would like to focus a little more on the fact that the universe is limited. But my point here is that the for a creature that has no capability of detecting light whatsoever, it's suddenly, and other creatures are still living. So it's not like every single creature is just dying because they cannot detect light. It's just that some creatures can, the creatures cannot detect light, and they're just going to continue living as they've been living. So to say that suddenly some creatures are now going to detect light specifically on the head for some strange reason, two of them, in order to detect depth, and then suddenly that skin of exclusive of all the other skin on the body of the creature suddenly starts becoming more sensitive to light for some strange reason, becomes indented, which makes no sense whatsoever. And then gradually, I'm saying that it makes much more sense to say that there's a designer who designed some creatures who can detect light very directly like we do, and some who are more sensitive to different spectrums of light, and some who are less sensitive or have different forms of detecting their surroundings. To say that this is like a complete answer, that it's just that this almost comical kind of theory, I really, honestly, I guess it's just from my perspective that it's just something that almost is at the point of silliness, because it's just this, just mashing together these ideas. And I've heard this lost before when it comes to, like, again, if we were to talk about the lungs, why on earth would the creature go from being able to live perfectly fine without having to have lungs, and then it somehow like knows how to form something inside of itself to be able to breathe oxygen, even though it has no idea how any of these things function. And it goes the same for there was also one other thing that I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's just one thing after another. Oh, right, the two genders, for example. Like, why exactly would it have a male and female in the first place when it functions perfectly well as it multiplies and it grows from that perspective? It's just one thing after another. I don't know if you wanted to respond to any of this.
Well, yeah, essentially all those questions have been answered in biology, and we can prove that they're true through genetic analysis and watching certain kinds of evolution in the lab that we can reproduce. So there's a really strong evidence to believe all of that is caused simply by natural processes. But I don't want to take up all your time by going through all those. You said you wanted to focus more on how the universe is limited. Like, I would ask you to just do a Google search for evolution of the eye or something, and you could watch the evolutionary process and read the published papers where they actually replicate this in the lab and show how it happened. But you said you wanted to focus on the limitedness of the universe.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying, like I've watched Richard Dawkins' explanation of the eye, and I've come across a number of articles in the past that I've read through, and it's just that, and the one that you explained was actually a little bit different than the ones that I came across, especially Richard Dawkins. The way that he explained it was a little bit different as well, but still, it just comes down to, when it comes to the design of the universe. Just to kind of finish off the point on design, is that it's just that there are, when you look at the sheer number of things that exist in the universe that are functional and for it to exist without any sort of design or any sort of intelligence behind it, I think that it's just the mind naturally understands, and that's why I find it interesting that you say that there must be something, but you're just kind of stopping short of saying that it's intelligent, right? And so how can it be that this thing is the setter of all the rules? It sets all the rules, it identifies all the rules, and it manages somehow the universe, but it's not intelligent, it's not self-aware. Yet we're self-aware somehow, but the designer of the universe isn't self-aware.
Well, how does did the designer set his rules of what makes him him?
So so yes and no. It depends on which one you're talking about. When it comes to the details, the nature of the universe, of the creator himself, the nature of the creator himself in terms of him being eternally existing. He has no limitations. That he has the capability of creating. He has the will to create, and the intelligence and the knowledge to do so. These things are intrinsic to what he is. But in terms of, for example, he can choose, for example, the Quran says that Allah himself chose mercy. He chose to be merciful over being wrathful. And so there are certain characteristics that he chooses and certain characteristics that are intrinsic to what he is as an eternal entity.
Right, so I'd go with the same explanation. I'd say this necessary natural thing has certain properties which are intrinsic to what it is, and those properties would be like setting the laws of or the physical laws to be what they are. So it's just an intrinsic property, just like you believe that there are certain intrinsic properties of God.
Yeah, but this thing that you're talking about, how can it set something without being self-aware or intelligent?
Well, it doesn't set, it doesn't choose. This is just intrinsic to its nature. Like if I asked you who designed God, what would you say?
Well, obviously, the creator himself does not have a design, but the thing is that we're not talking about the creator. We're talking about the design of the universe, requiring such a creator. So we don't know we don't know what essentially what in Arabic it's called Dhatillah, or the essence of the creator. We don't know exactly how the creator exists and exactly how he creates. For example, we don't know his essence. We don't know his exact. Uh, it's very hard to because you can't say makeup, or you have to just say his essence. So but we do know that he has the will and capability and the knowledge and so on to create the universe, because the universe exists, and he must exist in order for the universe to exist. So he must have these qualities in order for the universe to exist. But for you to say that the universe exists and it has all these rules, and all these rules are very clearly intelligent, and they're very clearly organized, and they very clearly have purpose and so on, and they're set, and they remain the way that they are, but the one that brought all this thing into existence has absolutely no intelligence, absolutely no will, and absolutely no involvement whatsoever, except for just somehow existing, and everything just happens to work. And so that thing, for it to not be eternal and self-subsisting before the universe existed. So because we're talking about an eternity, and the universe just now exists, and so for that eternal being to suddenly want to create, he has to have a will. He has to have a desire, like an intention, or the intelligence and the self-awareness to start creating. Otherwise, it's just this thing existing in the universe. That would mean that the universe would also exist eternally.
Right. So I can just say that just like you have this will that your God has a will that caused it to want to create the universe, I can say that there's some property of naturalistic pantheism, like a quantum state, which caused it to create at some point the exact same way. So anything that you can explain with God and the properties of this God, you say that it has these essential properties which it didn't choose. So God didn't choose to have these properties; they're just entailed in the God. Well, I can say the same thing about pantheism and said it has these properties which are entailed in pantheism. So it doesn't need to choose anything because they're already in it without its choice, without its knowing. Just like God has properties in it without God knowing. And I can say that these properties necessarily lead to the creation of the universe.
Yes, but that still doesn't answer. The thing is that when we talk about the properties of the creator, and I guess that there's a bit of a disconnect here, and it's kind of hard to really put my finger on it. But what it is that when we're talking about the creator of the universe creating, that requires a will. Like, it has to require the act of creating the laws and organizing them and so on. You're talking about a thing, a being. I'm not really sure. What do you call it, by the way?
Naturalistic pantheism.
Yeah, but like that sort of that lawmaker.
Well, it's not a lawmaker. It's like God doesn't choose to be all powerful, right? He didn't choose that. It's just a part of him. So he can't like unchoose it, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so I'm saying that they're like in the universe. Do you know a little bit about quantum mechanics at all?
A little bit, yeah.
So in quantum mechanics, there are particles that come into existence. They're called virtual particles. They just pop into existence. No one created them. They're just a part of the universe. They pop in and then they destroy each other and they pop out. So I'm saying that the entire universe could be essentially the same thing. There's just some property of naturalistic pantheism which causes it to have this quantum state which can cause things to pop in and out of existence. The universe is just one of those things. So it doesn't actually need a creator. It can just be a process, like a quantum process, where stuff can come in and out of existence on its own due to a law that's entailed in pantheism. So it doesn't actually need a consciousness to create the universe.
Yeah, but I would still say that that would mean that the universe would exist for as long as that thing exists. How is it that that thing just happens to exist and the universe doesn't exist for an eternity? So unless you're saying that this thing that set all the rules is intrinsically linked, obviously, to the universe, and therefore it is part of the universe and limited by the limitations of the universe, and it didn't exist prior to the Big Bang. Is that what you're saying?
No, it did exist prior to the Big Bang, and then there was some state of this thing which causes it to create at certain times. It doesn't cause it to create instantly as soon as it exists. It has a delay. Like quantum states don't happen instantly, they happen over a period of time based on probabilities. So because the probabilities spread out across certain states, they wouldn't just happen instantaneously. So the fact that this thing has this quantum state means it would create eventually, but it wouldn't necessarily create instantly at its own whatever eternally. So the universe would not exist eternally with this thing because of the quantum state. The quantum state would cause it to be delayed, just like a God would have to be delayed and make a choice at some later time. So it would be able to solve that problem, just like your God can. So there's a
I don't know. I still don't think that it solves the problem because we're talking about what came before us. Let's how about this? We draw a line between obviously the universe existing and the universe not existing. So prior to the universe existing, do you believe that there was nothing, or do you believe there was something?
something.
Okay, so you don't believe that. So you believe that prior to the universe, and what was that something?
The necessary thing, what I call naturalistic pantheism.
Yeah. So what's funny is actually you're just basically saying that you're saying that there's a creator, but he's just not intelligent, and what that does is that it removes any sort of responsibility that you would have towards this creator, or any sort of relationship with this creator. But you're saying essentially that there has to be essentially a being that pre-exists. Now this thing that pre-exists the universe, you're saying that it caused the Big Bang?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're saying that it specifically exists and it caused the Big Bang and it set all the rules of the Big Bang and everything that came from the Big Bang and all the rules of evolution and everything.
Yep.
And the question is why?
It was determined to do so. There was no choice. It was like a falling dominoes. It couldn't stop. No option.
So when you say falling dominoes, that means this thing must have a starting point.
No, the universe has a starting point. Does God have a starting point?
No, but I'm saying God has the ability to choose when he starts to create. This thing that you're talking about doesn't have the ability to choose when it starts to create. Therefore, it must have, if it's eternal, then it would have started the process essentially eternally ago, which is one of the reasons why we know the universe has a starting point. But still, the point is, let's just stick to that point, which is that if this thing does not have the will to start to create, and it's just intrinsic to it that it just creates, that means the universe would have had to start as soon as those rules existed in that object. And if you're saying it was a countdown, that means that thing has a starting point to its rules.
So think about God. Did God chose to create at some point, but he didn't create eternally. So the universe hasn't existed eternally with God. He had to choose to create it at some point, right?
Yes. But the point is that but that's because I believe God has, or the creator of the universe has the capability of choosing when to start. So the creator of the universe can exist for as long as he exists, and then he can start creating, and he could have created a lot of other things that we don't know about. But the point is that we know that he created this universe, and that he there was a starting point in it, and there was a purpose for it.
Right. So there must have been time before the universe because God was waiting and didn't create it for some point of time, and then he decided to create it.
Yes.
So I'm saying the same thing applies to pantheism, where there's some point of time before our time where it didn't create the universe, and due to quantum states,
but that would necessitate
what?
That would necessitate a will.
No, it does not, because we can do that with quantum states. Quantum states already solves that problem. We know that in the universe. We have this thing in the universe that already does this. We don't need a consciousness to be able to create particles from nothingness. We can already do that with quantum states. So
No,
there
no,
are
we're not talking
quantum
about,
states.
yeah, because so I'm not talking about creating particles. I'm talking about designing things. For things to appear and disappear in a quantum state is one thing. We're talking about for something to establish rules for the universe, to establish the rules of gravity and all the laws of physics and all the laws of biology and all the laws of chemistry. That just the fact that there's a table of elements, the fact that it's perfectly structured and perfectly designed. So for this thing to exist and just eternally exist and have all these rules but have absolutely no self awareness or consciousness or will to create or to do anything at all, actually all the rules are just there. If the rules are just there, then the rules would begin as soon as the rules exist. So the question is, why would suddenly processes begin when this thing does not choose when the processes begin?
So the rules are determined. So it's determined to make the rules in this way. It doesn't have an option. Now, the rules don't exist until the Big Bang exists, but the universe, or the pantheistic universe, can only create the universe in this way. So it's determined to do so. It doesn't choose, it doesn't think about it. This is the only option.
But don't you believe that something that exists that has rules set over it can't be eternal and self-subsistent?
Well, you already said that God has rules. Like he has
No, no,
these
no.
certain
So
properties. Remember,
no, but
certain
these
properties
are
that are.
not. Yeah, these are not rules that govern. Like these are not rules that prevent the creator from doing something. The creator himself, um, uh, like I said, it's just that it's weird how you're mixing these two things up. You're taking something, and I get this actually is a good maybe segue to the limited topic. The point is about the reason why we know the creator exists is because matter is limited in its very essence, in its very nature. Every single thing that we've ever observed in the universe is limited, whether it's limited in the shape and size, or limited in terms of its weakness, and limited in terms of it requiring other things to exist in order for it to exist in the state that it exists. Like, we need oxygen, we need certain levels of moisture, and so on. So one of the reasons why we know a creator must exist is because the universe, due to the fact that everything is limited and the sum of all things that are limited is a limited thing. That's why we know the universe has a set size, is kind of like a given. We know the creator must exist because this limited universe requires the existence of an unlimited creator. But you're talking about a being that exists that has limitations. The creator of the universe, the fact that when we say that the creator of the universe is eternal and has no limits to his knowledge and capability and so on. That's literally the definition of not being limited. You can't say he's limited by being unlimited. That's a silly argument, really. I mean, we're talking about this object that you're talking, this thing that exists, that has all the rules. It's actually limited. It cannot do certain things. Right? It cannot change. It cannot change its direction. It cannot change anything. That means these rules were set upon it, and therefore this thing, as far as I'm concerned, whatever you're talking about, is actually part of all the limited things in the universe. So even if it does exist, hypothetically, okay, fine, there's this thing that existed, and then it set all the rules. That thing was then created by the creator, because that thing has all sorts of rules that govern its very existence. Whereas the creator of the universe, his being unlimited is him not being governed by anything. Now, in terms of him choosing to be merciful, in terms of him choosing to punish or not punish, that's something that he chooses, and he can change however he wills. But for him to be, eternally existing, that's one thing. But for you to say this, and again, I know they keep on calling it. Sorry, what do you call it again?
Naturalistic pantheism.
Yeah, so you call it you calling it naturalistic pantheism. It's just. That's like the belief. It's like me saying Islam. You're saying naturalistic pantheism. That's why I'm having trouble naming this thing, because it must be an entity. It must be something that exists to set the rules for the universe.
Right. So if you look at your God is all powerful and eternal. Can he make himself not all powerful or eternal? Or is he set by those? He has to be those two things.
It's not that you can't. It's not. It's a nonsensical question, because he is like, you can't take something that's unlimited and say, can you take something that's unlimited and make it limited to show that it's unlimited? That's just a philosophical, like wordplay. The reality is that he's eternal. End of story. So that's one thing. So it's not saying that he's not bound by being unlimited. That's ridiculous, because it's a contradictory statement. It's nonsense. He is unlimited, and therefore that proves that he has no limitations, and he has nothing binding him, no rules that bind him, because he's unlimited. Whereas the thing that you're talking about is limited. You've already stated a number of things that bind it. and therefore those boundaries mean that it cannot be self-subsistent. That means there's something that put it together and lay those rules down. And I guess I understand that. Obviously, I understand your perspective. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that it just it's interesting how it's like I said, it's like you're looking for an alternative to the creator that is just enough to allow you to not believe in him. But when if you really break it down, you realize that all you're doing is you're just creating another created thing in your mind. And it's just, there's no way that this thing can just exist eternally and then suddenly just start creating. Because like I said, there's two problems with it. Number one is that it either eternally existed, and therefore it has to have a will in order to start creating just suddenly at some point in time in eternity, or it has a countdown, which means that it has a starting point from the point of when the rules were set of when it was supposed to start to create. And if that's the case, well, then it's just another created thing by the creator of the universe.
Right. So you have applied these properties. You say God must be eternal. Now I can just, that's called dogmatism. You're just saying it, asserting it arbitrarily. Now I can do the same thing with pantheism, say it just is this way to create the universe. Now that's not a limitation. It's just unlimited. I can just say it's nope. It's just unlimited. It's totally free, and it's a contradiction to call it an unlimited, just like what you did. It doesn't make it true, but I can do it. So anything you just said to say, well, oh no, this is just a property of God, and it's not a limitation. It's just a definition of unlimited. I can do the same thing for pantheism. That isn't actually an argument because there's no way to substantiate any of those claims. They're just assertions.
So, but that's the thing, because we're not at this point in time discussing, is the creator unlimited? If we're discussing that, then we can discuss the details of that. But I'm talking about, because the only thing we were discussing right now is that I'm saying that the creator is eternal, and you're not saying that he isn't eternal. You're saying, can he make himself uneternal, or can he make himself limited somehow? So that's a different discussion. The question of proving.
Right. I apologize to interrupt. So I'm saying the same thing. I can apply the same thing to what you call the limitations that cause it to create the universe in this way. I'm saying, well, that's a kind of an unlimited thing too. That's not a limitation either. It's just like eternal. It's just a natural property of the thing that makes it unlimited.
Yeah, but I guess not to go in circles, because now at this point we're actually going to go in circles, and I'm gonna end up repeating myself. But it's just that what I'm saying is that if we are to discuss the universe, and the question of does an unlimited creator need to exist? That's one topic. We haven't really gotten very deep into that. And then there's the next topic, which is if we were to say that the universe must be brought into existence by something, then we're now talking about, well, I'm saying it's a creator that's eternal, that has no limitations, and it has a will, and it is self-aware, and it's capable of creating and designing, and it's specifically and intentionally designed and created and so on. And you're saying that there's this thing that exists in the universe prior to the existence of, there's a thing that precedes the universe, and it's always existed, and it has all these rules, and it just started to create the universe. And I'm saying that, okay, well, now you're talking about something that's limited. You can't just say that, no, that's unlimited, because it's limited, because it doesn't have the ability to, since it lacks awareness, we have more than what this thing has, because we have self-awareness. That means this thing has a limitation to it. It has a weakness to it. It has a dependency of sorts, because it's dependent on whatever gave it its rules of when its starting point must be. And I guess, like I said, I understand what you're trying to say is that there's just this thing, and all the rules were there, and it just, it's just like almost like an act of it's almost like a random thing that just happens to exist. Am I wrong? Are you just saying it just happens to exist, and there's no reason why it exists? It just happens to exist. All the rules were set there, and everything the way the universe is just all part of was one gigantic, coincidence that just happens to have all the rules in it.
Well, do you think God exists randomly? Did God exist for no purpose?
No, so I'm saying that when the creator of the universe has to exist necessarily. So,
right. I'm saying that my pantheism has to exist necessarily.
Yes, but you're talking about something that has limitations to it, that it doesn't have the ability to choose.
Yours has limitations. As far as I can tell, everything you say, you keep applying these limitations, but you're just calling them not limitations.
Yes, but I'm saying that okay, so the creator of the universe can choose when to create. Can this thing choose when to create?
It does the exact same thing with quantum physics. Yes. It's just not choosing. It's just a quantum process.
Yes, but when we talk about the quantum physics and the way that quantum physics functions, is that it's a little more random. These, like, when we look at the design of the universe, things don't just pop in and out of reality. We look at the way that the world is organized on a quantum level. We don't even fully understand quantum mechanics. So you're kind of talking about something that we really don't yet fully understand, and we don't really understand why things function and the way that they do. We have a better understanding, but we're still a long, long way from actually understanding the reason behind all these things. But still, the point is, when we talk about the existence of something that does not choose when it creates, and it just happens to start creating at a particular point in time, you're talking about something that does not have the ability to even decide the rules themselves. And yet somehow this thing just happens to exist. When we talk about I guess maybe the thing that I guess what we had to focus on is just the point of having will and not having will. Is it possible for something to exist eternally without having the ability to determine a point of time of when to act?
Well, yeah, I would say that you're doing the same thing, because we don't really understand will or consciousness as much either. So it's kind of like, just like the quantum mechanics argument here. You're saying will and consciousness work in some undefined way that give you the option to freely choose, but we have no way to describe that. There's no definition of that about how consciousness works. So I can just say the same thing about quantum mechanics, say, well, there's just some unknown way quantum mechanics works, and they can do the exact same thing. So anything that you can say that can be done with this supernatural, I can just do it with a natural alternative.
Yeah, but we all can very clearly observe people choosing to act. We know that, for example, like, obviously, everyone who's listening, your computer, somebody chose to make that computer. And I can choose to put the computer together. I can choose to not buy the computer. So we know what free will works. We know what a will to do something, the will to go and make something, or to leave your house, and so on. So this is not some, like, some abstract concept that we're still trying to understand. Yes, we don't know exactly how consciousness functions on an internal mechanism basis, but on an external, we know exactly how it functions. So we're talking about for a creator to initiate an action. You're talking about that there's this thing that has no ability to choose when to initiate an action. We understand how initiating actions function, and we know that to initiate an intelligent action requires will and intelligence. You can't just say that something that has absolutely no will and absolutely no intelligence is capable of designing and creating something perfectly intelligent with a very specific purpose. I mean, like, as in every single rule has a very specific usefulness to it. So that's what I'm saying, is that what you're saying is you're basically describing a creator without without intelligence, really.
Right. Well, like you said about free will, well, actually, no. We pretty much understand that free will can't exist. It's essentially impossible. So here are your two
Explain that.
options. Okay, so
How's free will impossible to exist?
everything, any reason, anything you do is either done for an action, in which case it's determined by the action, or it's done for no reason, in which case it's random. So every action you do is determined for some reason, or you do it for some reason, in which case it's determined, or you do it for no reason, in which case it's random. There's nothing you can add to that to get free will. So either anything you do is either determined or random, and those are the only two options.
Yes, but it can be determined by you, or it can be determined by something that controls you.
Yeah, it can be determined by something that controls you, but it can't be determined by you. You are either determined or random, and those are the only two options. Every decision you make is either determined or random. So any action you decide, any decision, you either do it for reasons, in which case it's determined by the reasons, or you do it for no reason, in which case it's random. Those are the only two options. You can't actually make a decision.
No, but you can make a decision and then take an action based on that decision, and you can choose between two different decisions.
No. So it's the decision. Any decision you make ever is
Yeah.
either going to be done for reasons, in which case it's determined by the reasons, or it's done for no reason, in which case it's random. Those are the only options.
Yes, but you still have free will to choose the reasons. You can choose to accept the reasons, or you can even have reasons and then not obey those reasons. You can actually have, you can say, I shouldn't be doing this, and then still do it.
That's still a reason. That would qualify as a reason. Any decision you make ever, no matter what, it was to choose between one decision or another, or one reason or another, all of those are still decisions. And all of those are either going to be determined by other reasons, or they're going to be determined by no reason, in which case they're random. It's a deductive dichotomy. You only get these options. It's one or the other.
No, but you're completely ignoring the very fact that what you're doing is you're taking that whole argument within the confines of the absence of the existence of a creator, actually, which is obviously that's what's going to happen. The fact of the matter is, we're talking about free will from the concept of free will from the control of a creator. You having free will with, like, so if there was no creator and we're just all matter that exists in the universe, yes, your argument might hold water. But we're talking about a creator exists and he created us. We either have free will or he controls us. Right? When you look at a rock has no free will. A rock has no ability to do anything. It just sits there. There's entire life. It doesn't do anything at all. We can control it. I can take that rock, I can throw it against a piece of glass, or I can use it as a a paperweight or something like this. So the when we're talking about free will, we're talking about the ability to choose right or wrong. We have the ability to choose good or bad. So again, we're bringing in, obviously,
Well, I'm talking about the creator himself. Let's just think about from the perspective of the creator. Any decision the creator decides to make, he's going to do it for reasons, in which case that decision is determined by the reasons. And so he didn't have a choice, really, because he had to do it. Or he decided for no reason, in which case it was random.
No, that's I totally disagree with that. I think that that's completely baseless, because you're saying that because the reasons exist, the reasons control. But the thing is that that's just like, again, that's just like an academic textual thing that you can throw down on a piece of paper and it looks really cool, and you can just say, hey, look, I come up with this theory. The reality is that we know that when it comes to the issue of free will, you have a number of choices in front of you. You have a number of reasons, and you can work out. Let's say we're talking on a human level, you can work out whichever one you choose. Now, for the creator of the universe, again, we don't understand his essence, and therefore we don't understand the process that he follows in order when he chooses to make decisions. So that's something that I'm not even going to even bother arguing, because we human beings do not have access. It's kind of like, although it's obviously the creator of the universe has a significantly greater magnitude than this, but it's like having something that with the intelligence of a sim in a game, The Sims, and having that sim try to understand us and computers and computer chips, and that little sim doesn't even have a brain. So the thing is that thing, and imagine all these little sims are trying to sit there and argue and understand, free will, and are we controlled and whatever. And like, yes, your brain is so tiny, or your process, the little, how many megabits or megabytes or actually little bytes are being given to that one particular character. If you were to give a tiny amount of AI to them, for example, they wouldn't have any capability of understanding the level of complexity that we human beings and the computers and the world around us is. So for us to sit there and try to start assuming about the nature of the creator, we don't have that capability. But what we do know is that the creator of the universe must have the ability to create, and must have the capability of identifying purpose and creating for a purpose, and that requires intelligence, that requires a will. But again, if you're talking about free will, for us as human beings, I think it's very simple. We all have multiple choices, and for a fact. I mean, again, you can talk about some philosophical theory, or academic statement, but every single day during your life, you have free will. You can choose to do a lot of things, and the reasons that you have in your mind, they don't control you. You actually get to choose between a number of different reasons, and often you might have reasons to do something and you still won't listen to it. You just go with your desires, and so it has to do with the how much you put towards the weight of your intellectual analysis or your feelings, which actually kind of goes back to sometimes people choosing to not believe in a creator because they don't want to. And actually, here's an interesting thing, and this is not directed at you personally, although it might be related, but this is something that I discuss a lot whenever I'm giving talks on this topic, is that at the end of the day, believing in a creator requires a willingness and almost a desire to, not a desire to believe, as in like you're willing to put things aside in order to believe, but I'm saying that a person has to have, you can't have a refusal to accept the idea, because you will ignore very obvious facts. If a person refuses an authority over them, or refuses that they owe their life to something, or that they have to follow rules of something, especially with Christians, I find this exists much more with Christians than it does, or people who are from Christian families. This is a much bigger issue. A lot of atheists or ex-Muslims that come from Muslim families, their arguments are actually very different. But it's like this rejection of the rules and this authority that they just don't like, and they're looking for something to replace that with something that just makes enough sense so I can live my life and just kind of get on with it. But that's what I'm saying, is that's why when I'm talking about the simplicity of the argument, the human mind has always naturally known that the level of complexity of the universe, and at the same time, so not only the incredible near perfection of the setup of this universe, but as well as the incredible weakness of it all, the fact that everything could just completely fall apart when, at a hair's width. Whether it's the fact that our heart beats and this heart is just constantly beating, just, I don't know, I'm not plugged into anything. It just beats itself. All the blood just goes to all different parts of my body, and it just does it on its own. The rules of gravity don't fluctuate even slightly, and if they did, and if they do, I mean, obviously, if we were to once discover that they do, it's within a range that maintains the stability of the universe. The fact that, the way that the solar systems all function, and that anything goes wrong, anything functions even slightly differently, then everything would completely collapse. So the fact that everything is perfectly balanced, at the same time so incredibly fragile, a human being naturally knows that. We all know at the end of the day, I mean, if a person refuses to take this into account, then okay, yes, what am I supposed to do? I can't make a person, can't make a, what is the house? I mean, you can say I can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. It's just that's what I'm saying, is that I think that there sometimes is an unwillingness to consider the authority of something over you.
All right, so you brought up a few points there I'd like to pick up on. The first one was when you said that we can't really know the mind of God. I don't remember the exact phrasing you used, but we can't really imagine how that works. We can use that argument to justify anything. I can say, well, yeah, there's some natural process and we can't understand how it works, and then done. So I can say the same thing exists in pantheism and just say, well, it's beyond our imagination, it's beyond what we can imagine, and say it's done. So the whole point I'm making is that all of this stuff you're saying about God, it just rests on that one argument of, oh, well, we can't understand it, therefore it's totally reasonable to believe. But that's a contradiction, because I can say the same thing about pantheism. I don't actually believe in pantheism. The whole point I'm showing is just every argument you're making can be made for a naturalistic thing arbitrarily for no reason, and we can just say, it's beyond our imagination, therefore it's reasonable to believe. But that doesn't give us reason to believe this thing actually exists. Now, everything that we see around us can be explained from natural things, like just using quantum logic or deterministic processes, and we can just make it work by saying we can't understand it, but it's there anyway. But that argument isn't a reason to actually believe the thing exists. And the second thing you brought up was the fine-tuning of the universe. The fine-tuning actually is a reason to believe there isn't a designer. Because if there was a designer, if the universe was designed for life, then there would likely be a lot of life. There's not a lot of life. There's a very little amount of life, and it's very hard for it to survive. So if we think about like all the possible universes, if there's a universe with lots and lots and lots of life, and they say our universe is clearly designed for life, and there's life on every planet or whatever, they have a good argument because they have lots of life. And then if we look at our universe and we have this little bit of life, which is very hard to survive, and we make the argument that our universe is designed for our life, we have a really bad argument. In fact, we have the worst possible argument for design that could be, because life is so hard, because there is so little life. So the fact that life is so hard to exist in the universe is actually an argument that there isn't a designer. Because if there was, our universe would look a lot like that other universe with lots and lots and lots of life. And they could say, our universe was designed for life. And they would have a much better argument.
All right, just making a couple points. So a couple of things about that. So with regards to what you said about there being lots and lots of life, that would be fine if it wasn't for the point that the creator of the universe has will and purpose, and he created the universe for a particular reason. So if the creator of the universe did create the universe in order to show us the fragility of everything, and it draws our attention, actually, and I really disagree with you, actually, the fact that we exist on the only place that has, if everything had lots and lots of life, the argument that the universe can just have all these things and life can exist everywhere and it's all just random and it all just kind of works, that would work. That would make a lot more sense. The fact that it doesn't work anywhere, and it shouldn't work here, we just happen to be on the right exact, like if you look on the scale of the universe, this is like absolutely ridiculous. Like it's just for us to be at the exact right place, at the exact right point. We're not crashing into everything, and we're just the right distance between, the part of the earth is frozen, part of it is burning, and it just happens to have life on it. Something, life that should not exist. Again, when you talk about an infinitely dense or infinitely an infinitely dense ball of matter, or whatever it is that you want to describe the beginning of the Big Bang, and then it just contains just molecules and just explodes. Life is nonsense in this context. There's absolutely no reason. That's why I find it even funny when they're looking for water on other planets. They're saying, oh, well, look, we can find life. Well, the thing is that life isn't the only component. It's like, as I said, again, this is a bit of maybe a whole other really big topic, so maybe I shouldn't get into it. But the thing is that all I'm saying is that the fact that life exists on this planet, and it only exists on this planet, it draws our attention to the fragility point that I mentioned, which is that it makes us realize that this is so precisely done that there must be some purpose behind this, right? And so why are we here? Why are we the only ones that have this functional planet? And so then we have to ask, what is it that we're supposed to be doing here? And it's not different from, I sometimes give this example is that, me and you and a bunch of friends were walking, in this down the road. We get a van drives up and guys jump out, they knock us over the head and they put us into the van, and then we drive off. We don't know how long we've been knocked out. Suddenly we find ourselves in this tiny little extremely well designed facility that's kind of open air and whatever, and it's in the middle of this completely barren desert. And it, you can travel for months in one direction, you find absolutely nothing. But in this little area that we're in, it's perfectly designed, everything is perfectly functional. And somebody says, nope, this just happens to exist, this is just a natural thing that came out of the ground or something. Somebody will say that your head's not screwed on properly. Yes, obviously this was designed. So it's the same thing. We're in this universe where everything is extremely hostile and completely, nothing should like like this Earth cannot exist, or it doesn't seem to exist anywhere else, and yet it exists. So that's kind of my response to that one. As far as you saying that, for us to say that, well, we don't understand how the creator makes decisions, and therefore that's the same as what you're saying, I can apply the same. You keep on saying that, but I don't see how that works, because I'm addressing something specific about either of them. I'm saying that for the universe to exist with all of these rules and regulations and systems and everything, it indicates there needs to be something that sets all these rules. And these rules are intelligent. Again, when you look at the design of the human body, the fact that our hands function, the fact that again, I keep on going through these examples because it's baffling to me that a person can see all this and think that this is not intelligently set. And then so for us to say, okay, well, it comes from something that is not intelligent, what you're saying is that you're kind of accepting the fact, and that's one thing I really like about this discussion with you, by the way. I like the fact, because I discuss with other atheists that drive me up the wall, really, because it's like, they're like, no, I don't see any possibility that there's any intelligence behind this. And I'm saying, okay, well, there's no point having this discussion. That's why even sometimes when I come to these conversations, I don't even think it's going to last for 15 minutes, because as far as I'm concerned, it's like, you're just talking complete gibberish to me, because for you to say that there's no evidence whatsoever for this universe to have been designed, so at least you're saying that yes, you recognize that that there must be something that sets the rules for all of this intelligent design to exist. And then so I'm saying is that there's no way that thing can exist without having intelligence, because these are intelligent rules. And at the end of the day, I guess I understand that, I guess we're just going to hit it. We're just going to run in circles here. If there's more to discuss, obviously, I'm more than happy to. But I think that this is the issue that it comes down to, is that, it's essentially to really believe that not only does the universe exist without any purpose behind it, no intelligence behind it whatsoever. It just, all this happens to just something exists, and I still believe that this really just like kind of like you're just replacing the creator with something that you don't have to really have any responsibility towards. But of course, no offense. I hope we don't take any offense at that.
Oh, well, just to clarify, I don't actually believe in pantheism. I'm just using this as an alternative to show that we can use the same arguments to show a different conclusion. So I don't actually believe in the pantheism thing. It's just an alternative hypothesis.
So, okay, now I'm confused. So you were saying that you did believe in this?
No, let me clarify. So imagine you have a box, and you claim that there is a rabbit in the box. And you said the reason there's a rabbit in the box is because the box weighs 2 pounds. Well, that's not actually evidence there's a rabbit in the box, because that 2 pounds could be explained by a lizard or a coffee mug or a Legos or anything else. So what I'm doing is with the same thing. The arguments and the evidence for the existence of God are kind of like the box weighs 2 pounds. If I can show it also works for something that isn't a God, well, then it's not evidence of a God. Now, it doesn't mean I actually believe that there's this pantheism or this other thing in the box. I just mean that doesn't indicate that there is a God there, because it could work for all these other alternatives. And so pantheism is the alternative I'm presenting to show that we can use all those same arguments to indicate a different conclusion. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. So the thing is, then the problem is that the only things that you can say are in that box are things that would fit the description, that would be legitimate options.
Right, that would be the 2 pounds, right?
Exactly. So you can't say there's 2 pounds of air, right? Well,
Well, you
air is
can
like,
actually, but yeah,
animal.
I get your point.
Yeah, like the point is that it has to be something that kind of, it's sensible. It's a sensible answer. So the thing is that maybe more accurately, maybe like a slightly better example is the fact that you're saying that, you have an object that you found in the desert that has, like, let's say like a sword. You find a sword in the desert, and you're saying that, well, where did this sword come from? You can't just say, you know, um, dinosaurs made it, or no, even maybe a little more sensible, because dinosaurs, we don't know, maybe dinosaurs don't know how to make swords. So you can't say that, like, baby kittens made it. Well, yeah, well, baby kittens have hands and they have teeth and they could, work, like a whatever, like a drill or something like that. And that's the thing, is that, look, no, that's not a rational, sensible argument. So the thing is that there has to be a certain number of things that must exist in order for the answer to be fulfilled. And so when you look, and not only that, you look at the purpose of the sword. The sword has a purpose. A cat has no use for the sword. A sword has a handle and it has a sharp side, and therefore, sensibly, we look at it and say that this sword was designed for it to be held by a hand and to cut something. So now, if it's of some random shape, then you might not be able to conclude anything. But when you look at this universe, you realize that there are systems that we can analyze, and we can recognize that there's purpose behind every single thing that we study, and there's usefulness. And so, for something to have, so then we ask the question, well, where did all this come from? Same thing paralleling with the sword. So then when you look at what is is it possible that something could have made this sword that had no intelligence? Is it possible that something that made the sword that had no purpose? Of course, everyone would know the answer is no. In order for the sword to exist, something, a human, generally speaking, would have to have not only the ability to make a sword, but a reason to make a sword. And so, for something to bring the universe into existence that has no will and no purpose, even the point of capability is even doesn't even apply. Then this is just, playing the devil's advocate at this point in time. If that's essentially what you're doing. What I'm saying is that, then what I'm asking is, you specifically, what do you specifically believe? I'm not saying a possible answer. Where do you believe this universe came from?
The correct answer is we don't know. We have no idea where the universe came from. But we have no reason to believe one alternative over the other. But I wanted to pick up on your example of the sword in the desert. Now, we already know swords are designed, so it's kind of a circular reasoning begging the question, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So let's say we go to a desert and we see lots and lots of things that look kind of like swords. Most of them are broken, most of them are bent, most of them wouldn't really work very well, but we see this one that is like a perfect sword. Now, would it be reasonable to conclude that sword was designed, or that there's maybe some natural process producing sword-like things, and it will just happen to get this one right?
We would obviously conclude that this was designed, and it wasn't just like there was a purpose behind it to make that final sword.
So all of the failed swords were also had a purpose, even though they were all bent and broken, and there's a whole bunch of them, a lot more of them. That it was all for this one sword.
Well, see, the thing is that what you're excluding, if you want to draw this as a parallel to the universe, it doesn't work, because you're excluding part of the purpose for a man to realize that he exists in a universe that must have been created and designed by a creator, because where we are and how things are can't exist on their own. So if you're looking at, so the example of the sword is a little different, because you're talking about what a person would rationally deduce, that this is a person who's either trying to learn how to make swords, or a person who was trying different techniques or something like that, and then made one really good sword. That's not a parallel for the universe, because we're not saying every single thing in the universe is broken. All the laws that exist here on Earth exist out there, and all the laws function perfectly. And this doesn't look like just an attempt, and there's other failed attempts where you find worlds of just like dead creatures and everything didn't work. We're finding nothing except for on this Earth, and everything here works absolutely perfectly on a macro and on a micro level. On every single level, the laws are specifically here to function perfectly, right? And so that, and not only that, there's all sorts of other things as well, like the lineup of the sun and the moon to give us eclipses at the exact ratio and exact distance, in order for us to see that the moon and the sun are the exact same size. And the fact that this creates, in a sense, of awe that makes us think of, like some sort of, it gives us, spiritual feelings, which is like,
Wait,
it
one
draws our
second.
attention
You
to.
said the moon and the sun are the exact same size?
Yeah, so I can't remember what the ratio is, but the distance between the Earth and the moon and the width of the moon to the sun are the exact same ratio, which is why when the moon passes over the sun, they look the exact same size in an eclipse.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify because somebody
Yeah,
might pick up on that, and you said the moon and the sun are the exact same size, and they might try to like
yeah,
take it
yeah,
out of context and say,
yeah, yeah.
so okay.
Wait a second. Yeah, thanks.
But if we look at the planets, like if we look at all the different solar systems and all the different galaxies around the universe, they look a lot like the broken swords, and ours looks like the really good sword. So it doesn't look like the universe is designed. It looks like, oh, well, there's just a bunch of random swords, a bunch of broken ones, a bunch of bent ones, and oh, look, here's one really nice one. And if we could do the
Yeah,
same
but
thing with
would
the
you?
universe, we can say there are lots and lots of different universes, which is called the multiverse theory. And they're all different broken universes with different variants of the kind of sword things. And we just live in the one that's the perfect sword.
Yeah, and so but you would say that if you saw a whole bunch of these broken swords strewn all over the place, you say that nothing made this. This
Well,
all of it
no.
just came randomly, and the last sword just just happened to come from a process that wasn't specifically chosen and designed.
Well, like I said at the beginning, swords, we already know swords are designed. And so it's kind of begging the question. We have to use a
Yeah.
different example, kind of like certain kinds of patterns in rocks. Like we can say gemstones. Like gemstones make very nice patterns. They can be in like triangles and pyramids and octagons. And we can see all kinds of really nice shapes that come out of gems and those kinds of lattice structures when the atoms line up correctly. Now, we wouldn't assume these are designed because we know of a natural process that can do exactly that. So if there could be a natural process that could make the sword, quote unquote, then we could say, well, no, we have no reason to believe this is designed because here's a natural process that can do it.
Yeah, but the designs, when you're talking about the lattices and so on within the gems, these are obviously random and with no purpose other than beauty. So that's a little bit different. Now, if you were to give example of something that has purpose in it, then the whole argument shifts.
Well, I would say that we can make the same argument about the planet and the universes, is that they also could be explained by random processes, and it just looks like we have purpose from our perspective. We want it to have purpose.
No, because I'm still talking about purpose in terms of usefulness. So we're talking about purpose in terms of the fact that not everything has nutrients in it. Only certain things, fruits, animals, vegetables, and nuts and stuff like that, grains. So there's a limited number of things that we can get nutrients from. You can't just go and like eat drywall and live off of that. So the thing is that, or I guess rocks in this case would be maybe a better example. So the thing is that there's lots and lots of things that exist on this planet that again, when you have the fact that we live in an air bubble, the fact that there's a coating on the outside that holds everything kind of in, the fact that there's a magnetic we can call, I guess, a sphere that protects us from the solar flares. There's just so many different things that just happen to exist. And again, the distance from the sun and the fact that there's some planets around that just protect us from all the, Jupiter, that protects us from all the asteroids and so on. And so that's the thing, is that there's lots and lots of when you look at all these things in terms of the purpose, it's all these things, their purpose somehow allows life to exist. That's the point. The point is that all these things exist here, and the amount of water and everything is just happened to be here to allow life to exist. And so it's just, and then on top of that, you have life existing, and then some life is self-aware, right? And so and that self-aware creature just happens to start thinking about a creator of the universe and looks at this world and says, well, I can understand that this must be designed because look at how it's designed. And not only that, then we go to the next topic altogether, which is the question of whether or not the creator sent a message. And then we talk about, the Quran and things like that, the miracles that are associated with it. And then that opens up obviously a whole massive discussion. But obviously, I don't really see much point discussing it if you don't believe in the existence of a creator. So if there's no creator, then there's no message.
Right. So when you were describing all the things about the Earth, about how we have the magnetic poles that block the radiation from the sun, and the way we have Jupiter that blocks the asteroid, and the way that we have atmosphere, all of these things, if we look around at all the solar systems, we see, oh, well, there's a kind of a broken sword, and oh, there's a kind of a broken sword, and oh, there's a kind of a broken sword, and we just happen to be the nice sword. So we see a naturalistic process to produce all of those things, because we see there are billions and billions of galaxies with millions of trillions and trillions of planets and stars and all of these things. So there's a natural process that produces all of those. So that would be kind of like the sword example. If we see a natural process that does this, we shouldn't assume a designer, because we can see this being done all across the universe. So
But when you say, sorry, go on.
So in the context of just our planet and the fine tuning of like how our distance from the sun and the Jupiter and all those other things, we see natural processes that produce all of that. So it seems reasonable to conclude that all of that was done not by a designer, but by a natural process that creates galaxies.
Yes, but when you're talking about a process that produces, I mean, even that word itself, like as far as I can see, doesn't really fit, because when you're talking about something that produces, like as if these are all kind of like, if you were to see, I think maybe a better example, if you were to use the sword example, if you were to find, 100 broken swords that are all broken in the exact same way, right? And then you have one that just happens. So we're not talking about some that have, like, we're not talking about a gradual process, or different phases of different broken swords, or he got this part right, he got that part right, because that's not what's happening in the universe. The entire universe is basically the same. All the commonalities in terms of the brokenness of all of it is identical across the board. Earth is the only one that has everything. And so when you're talking about, if you were to see all these pieces of metal essentially that are all kind of sitting there, and they're all broken in the exact same way, and then suddenly there's one sword that is not only perfectly functional, but has like thousands of different components that the sword could not possibly exist without it. So that's the other thing too. We're not talking about a sword that you can just hammer out and suddenly it looks nice. We're talking about a sword that has I don't know, like, not only it has but gems that are counterbalanced, and when you swing the sword, they kind of spin in a particular way, and et cetera, et cetera. So you have this sword that is so intricately designed, it doesn't look like it's from the process of all these other swords. It just looks like, that's what I'm saying. That's why this parallel doesn't really work, because
Well, I'm kind of getting lost. There's two different examples here. One is when you talk about the Earth and we look at the Earth compared to other planets, we have lots and lots and lots of swords to compare to. But when we talk about the universe, we only have one universe. We can't see any other universes. They're going to be out there. They're just too far for us to see.
Yeah, because I'm talking about planets.
Right, so planets, we do have all of those swords, and they're all different kinds of shapes and sizes, and they're all broken in different places, and they're all bent. Like, some don't have a Jupiter, and so they're hit by asteroids. Some are too close to the sun. Some are too far away. Some don't have an atmosphere. Some don't have enough mass to sustain heat in a magnetic field by having the core, a metal core that causes it to spin. So when we look at the planets, there are lots of different swords that are broken all over the place. They're not all broken in the same place.
Yeah, but you're still not including all the details within this planet as well. So we're talking about not only the components that need for life to exist, but we're talking about on this planet itself, there are lots and lots of things that have nothing to do with the necessity of life. There's lots of things when it comes to just simply the fact that there's colors, the fact that we recognize that there's colors, and there's this thing called beauty, which is completely unnecessary. We don't need to have anything beautiful in this world. We don't even need to really recognize anything beautiful. All we need to have is something that feeds and doesn't feed, kills and doesn't kill, survives and doesn't survive. Really, that's basically how we should have turned out if it was exclusively, purely just survival of the fittest. But the fact is that we have some things that are aesthetically pleasing in this universe. Like, when we look at certain things, they're not that beautiful. When you look at a big pile of mud in the ground, I mean, maybe if you're like a scientist and you're looking at worms, something, you might find beauty in that. But the point is that if you just aesthetically from the outside, and then you look at, for example, like a waterfall or the stars shining in the sky, there's lots of things that's aesthetically beautiful about this world, and we recognize that. So that's the other thing too, is that there's lots and lots of things that if you just my point is that it's not just one particular thing like we can focus on, with the design of the eye or the design of the heart or the beauty of things, it's just that when you look at every single thing together, for all of this to exist, it doesn't make any sense for this to exist, first of all, without something had to have designed it all. And the second thing, which is for something to have designed these things with a purpose. So if you were to look at it from the outside and say that, like, again, you're looking at let's say a guy designing a Sims world, and then you design a Sims world that's really beautiful, right? And then you design the Sims to appreciate, like, when you plop down when you're doing like what is it, Sim City. Have you ever played Sim City?
No, I haven't. I played other games though that are similar, where you build lots of cities and stuff and supply resources to all the people and try and get them to live lives and stuff.
Yeah. So I used to play SimCity a lot, and I never played The Sims. I always found it to be really boring. But so SimCity, if there's like levels of happiness of people in a particular area. So in your city has a level of happiness, and so you plop down a little park in the middle of a like a busy business area or an industrial area, and suddenly all these little smiley faces pop up. And the thing is that this is clearly a design from the outside, for us to feel happy in a certain environment and unhappy in a certain environment. Why would that be? If as long as we're surviving, the fact that all these different components exist indicate that there's intelligence behind it, and so there's just so many things that simply shouldn't exist, in terms of whether it's the laws of the universe themselves or it's for us how we react to certain things. Our design. There's lots of things that really don't make any sense at all, like why we are structured in a particular way, and it's just the structure is set. We don't have more arms, we don't have more fingers or less fingers. We have two eyes, again, with the depth perception. We have just so many mechanisms that protect us, but at the same time, they're still extremely fragile. You would think that after all of this time of survival of the fittest, there's lots of things like the eye would become a lot stronger, would become less susceptible to damage. We wouldn't, the body wouldn't respond so well to unhealthy food, like in terms of how much we want to eat it. And again, the same thing when it comes to the issue of, having two sexes and then needing. So because there's another interesting thing, which is that if you look at it from the perspective of a creator, you can say that, okay, well, the creator chose for there to be two genders and then made them attracted to each other. And in order to procreate so that they can have more children. And so if you remove that desire, then nothing will ever happen between them. Like you will feel just as much desire to go towards the opposite gender as you would feel to go towards a wall. And so when the creature that was evolving split into two genders, because originally it was just multiplying on its own, split into two, and then at what point did it make itself attracted to the other side? And so what did everything just die, and then that's it? And so there's so many things, so many gaps that, and I don't know, maybe if you have an answer for this one, but that's something, and that's another thing for me that just doesn't make any sense from the perspective of just from within the system. If you look at it from the outside, something designing it, you can say, okay, well, it makes sense now. This was designed and it's part of our desires, and we either give in and we fornicate, or we don't and we get married. But for it to just split into two sexes and then required to come back together to procreate and have more children, which is so inefficient and completely nonsensical from a survival perspective. How would you answer that one, by the way?
Well, actually, it's really beneficial for survival. And from my perspective, I see it again like the swords. There's just a whole bunch of different swords. They're all broken and bent in different places. When we look at all the different kinds of life, those are all the different kinds of swords. So we see there are certain kinds of species of lizards that are all female, just completely. There are no males in the species, and so they're just female, a complete female species of lizards, but they can still reproduce asexually. And there are certain kinds of like snails and all those kinds of asexual animals prior to being having two sexes. I forget what it's called. But there are lots and lots of different species that have a variety of different kinds of sexes. And the reason that we prioritized having two sexes is because of recessive and dominant traits, where you can have more information stored in your DNA across the two different sexes. And some of it can be recessive and some of it can be dominant. But if you're only asexual, then all of the DNA from you goes to your kid. And so any kind of change, any kind of like mutation in your DNA is going to go into your kid, and it's going to be not as good. Whereas if you have two kinds of genes and some are recessive, if there's a negative like mutation in the recessive trait, well, it can just be ignored and it can prioritize the better trait. And so there are definitely evolutionary benefits to having two sexes, a lot of them, which is why most of the bigger creatures all have two sexes rather than asexual. But of course, evolution has gone the other way, and we've lost the male-female dichotomy and went to just the all-female species of lizards over time because of whatever. I don't know exactly what features in evolution caused that, or it had something to do with their environment. But we see this spectrum. For me, it just looks, again, like all those swords that are all broken in different places. And, well, ours just has this one nice sword that we think is a really nice sword.
Yeah, and I guess it's just that I find that, again, these answers are what I find funny about your answer is that you're describing something extremely complex and intelligent in terms of how it's designed, with the DNA and the recessive and the dominant and so on. And the point is that we're talking about something that doesn't have any intelligence at all. determining this process or whatever. The point is that we're talking about things that are just existing without anything whatsoever organizing it. And you're talking about this intricate choice of, well, this is more and this is less. And the point is just survive or don't survive. That's all that exists back then. Something exists, something survives a little better, or something survives a little bit worse. Something that can multiply on its own. You're saying that you're saying that, okay, so from point A, which is being able to replicate or procreate or reproduce on its own, and then there's point B, which is having to like male and female, and they have to come together in order to procreate. To jump from here to here, you're just completely skipping the link. You're just saying, well, this is beneficial, and therefore there must be some sort of a link. But what I'm saying is that how can there be any link? Because at some point in time, it would have had to split, and it can't procreate. Why wouldn't it split and still be able to replicate without, sorry, go on.
Well, it did. The original origin of sex was that you had asexual reproduction, and then those asexual reproducing animals were able to have relations with each other and create children, but they could also still reproduce asexually. And we see that in a lot of different kinds of species, like snail species. They can both have sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. So the evolutionary pathway is that you started with asexual, where they only reproduce on their own, and then they eventually evolve the ability to have relations with each other, but they're still asexual. So they can still
but don't you see the gap in that? Like, why would only one gender have the ability to feed the children, for example? Right? Look, why is it that the other one would be strong and the other one would be physically weaker? Like, there's just so many things that okay. And again, so what about these? How does that fit?
Well, those would come in millions of years later. So the first state was just the having two sexes. That came from starting with asexual, and they had small changes which then allowed them to reproduce with each other. And then eventually, like millions of years after that, they then lost the asexual ability, because they all were prioritizing the sexual ability, and they no longer needed the asexual thing because they weren't using it. And so then they lost the asexual thing and started to evolve sexual dimorphism, where one race or one sex would be stronger or faster or certain other characteristics.
And so why wouldn't they both do that? Like, why is that only one sex would have certain traits and the other one would have other traits? Like, it's in terms of an evolutionary process, in terms of survival of the fittest, why wouldn't they retain these capabilities, and why would they just pass it on to the other? Do you understand? Again, it's just, I understand how you're going to kind of, like, it's the explanations that I get from people who argue this angle. It's that you talk almost in kind of umbrella points. It's kind of like, well, here's the idea, and it just somehow worked, and we don't, like, and then I can draw all these sorts of links together, and but when you stop and think about it very carefully, it is complete nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Because how is it possible that something that split into two genders, and now they're identical still, because now they're able to not only are they identical in their design, but also in terms of suddenly for some reason they're attracted to each other? And why would they be attracted? What are they attracted to exactly? We're not going to answer all those questions, obviously. Or if we do, we're just going to kind of put together something. And then suddenly they come together. And then what's going to happen over time is one of them is going to be capable of feeding the children. The other one's going to be completely incapable of feeding the children. And then as time kind of progresses, then, things gradually change. And then somehow at some point, sexual desires, come into it. And it's just that, what I'm saying is that if you look at both arguments, one from the perspective of design and the other perspective of just randomness, the idea that all this is random is so much less believable than the idea that it was designed by a designer. The designer specifically chose two genders, and it created some things that are asexual. Again, when we're talking about the human design, we're talking about the laws of gravity and the chemistry and physics and biology and so on. All these things are very clearly, the mind naturally can see that, okay, if there was a designer for this, then then it's obviously designed by a designer. There's no oddity about the argument. But when you say that, no, this is all completely random, and it turned out in a perfect system. Like, and somebody could say, well, no, this is not exactly perfect, but even the imperfections are perfect. Even illness is designed in such a perfect way. There's cures. Like, there just happens to be cures in things that are completely unrelated to the human, to the virus, to the thing. It just, there's a plant somewhere on the other side of the planet that if you harvest it and you eat it, it cures you of this particular disease. And so, it's like all these things. If you look at it from the perspective of it's designed, then it makes a lot of sense. But you're just saying it's all just random, 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 and there's no way of knowing. Then that's why, going back to your point, which is, I'm a little bit, actually a tiny bit frustrated that I spent all this time discussing a point that you don't even believe in. But it's just that you can argue, oh well, there's a number of ways of looking at this. There's a number of answers. Okay, fine, yeah. You can argue all sorts of things. You can say that we're sitting in this middle of this desert and everything is barren and dead, and this little plot of land with all this technology. All this technology just happened to seep out of the ground in a very specific way. There's minerals and iron and metals and whatever. They just seeped out of the ground in a particular way that designed this facility that is perfectly functioning and useful, and obviously there's a purpose and an intent behind it. And so a person can argue as much as they want, but it's just that when it comes down to the bottom line, it's if a person doesn't want to, then that's really the end of the line. As long as the person understands the argument, and that's why I can sit here and argue all sorts of philosophical arguments, and because I watch a bunch of your videos, and of course I know Hamza Tzortzis. Do you know Hamza Tzortzis?
Yes, he debated Lawrence Krauss on the fine tuning.
Yeah, and then there's Muhammad Hijab now. He's well known, and so these are a lot of people that we know, and so they discuss from that angle. And I've watched their videos and I've studied a lot of this stuff, and I just kind of I don't discuss from that perspective, because yes, it looks great in debates and you can have these huge audiences and stuff like that, but this is like when you talk about a layman discussion, just a discussion for the average person who doesn't understand 90% of this terminology. It's just that it's a very simple thing that the human mind comprehends, which is that this universe clearly has a purpose, clearly has design. And if a person says there's no purpose and there's absolutely no design, this person is just talking nonsense. But if a person says, okay, I can recognize there's design, I can recognize that there needs to be purpose, but I don't know what made it, and so on, then at that point, you can say that I would honestly say that in most cases that I've come across, there's an unwillingness deep down inside. A person doesn't want to believe in a religion. Right, because once you believe there's a creator, you have to believe in a religion. You have to start looking for religion. And once you follow religion, organized religion, and religious books, and now I have to look into the book, and I have to follow these clergy, and especially if you've had bad experiences with religious figures, or like for me, before I accepted Islam. So this is back in I accepted Islam in about 1998, 1999. And I remember I hated religions prior to that. Although I believed in a creator at that point, I could recognize that there was something that was behind all this. But I hated all religions, and one of the primary reasons was because back in those days when we had only satellite dishes, I used to watch some of these evangelical shows where there's this one guy who used to sell a green handkerchief. Have you ever heard of that?
Is it the one that absorbs all of the water?
No, this one was it's a blessed handkerchief.
Oh.
And you pay like $20 for it. So there's that guy, and he just it's a piece of cloth that's worth like 10 cents. And it's a blessed handkerchief that he's blessed through God, or God's blessed through him. And then there's another guy, a complete piece of garbage. He was telling people that even if you are broke, even if you are in debt, you pay monthly installments to me and God will make you rich. And so I could just tell these people are so corrupt and such liars. I hated religion as a whole because it just sickened me that people are so corrupt in religions. And then, of course, when I looked into Islam, I realized that it's completely different. Islam is very unique in its intellectual foundations. And so I guess maybe if you don't mind, I don't know if you want to, was there anything else you want to discuss on those previous points?
Well, yeah, a few things you said. One was that you're right that I'm talking in umbrella terms because I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I can't actually go through in detail and show you the steps, but we have actually done that. We can demonstrate and prove each of these steps in evolution. Evolution has been studied incredibly thoroughly, and we can show you the evolution of the eye from step 1 to where we are now. And it's evolved 8 different times at least in the evolutionary tree, with some that are better than ours, like the octopus and some kind of shrimp that can punch underwater at the speed of sound. The eagle's eyes and hawk's eyes are better than ours. There's all kinds of different evolutions of the eyes, and it's been done independently many different times across the evolutionary scale. So evolution has covered this very, very in detail. They're not umbrella terms in evolution. I'm using umbrella terms because I'm not an evolutionary biologist and I can't explain it that well, but it's definitely very, very precise in evolution. The second thing you said was, from my perspective, it all looks like that broken sword. There's just tons and tons of broken swords. They're all different shapes and sizes. None of them are the same. They're not broken in the same place. And there just happens to be one that we really like that looks really designed to us. And I see that when we look at the life, and I see that when we look at the origin of the planet. And I see that when we look at the origin of the universe too. It all just looks like this is just one really nice sword. And when we look over there, there's just a whole bunch of other broken swords, and they're all broken in random places. And so to me, it looks like it's probably just a random process that's doing this. And if it was a designer, I'd expect them to be just a whole bunch of really nice swords all lined up, one after the other. If I saw that, I'd be like, yeah, that's probably, yeah, okay, I can conclude design if there's just a whole bunch of nice swords. But if there's a bunch of just one nice sword and a whole bunch of broken swords, then I'm probably going to say not. It's harder for me to believe there's a designer in that case.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of
Oh,
in
I
terms
forgot.
of
There's one more thing I wanted to say.
yeah.
When you brought up religion, the reason I particularly don't believe in a god is because of like more specific reasons. Like you're right that all of these philosophical arguments aren't really relevant to people's everyday lives. These are more broad topics that have to do with like how the universe works. And you're right that most people intuitively see design when we look around at the world. But the question is like we see design in things like fairy circles. Fairy circles are a kind of plant that grow in a circle shaped mushrooms in a perfect circle. And we assumed that, well, that must be designed by fairies, and they call them fairy circles. But then later we discovered, like, actually, no, there's this naturalistic process that produces that. And we thought that lightning, when lightning struck, that was designed. Like you see lightning hit a guy in the middle of a field. Oh, that must be Zeus because he was angry at that guy. And then later we learned about electromagnetism. And if there's a guy standing in the middle of the field with a giant iron rod, a giant iron sword in his hand, it's pretty likely electricity is going to hit him. And so when we look at the universe and the origin of life, it's kind of like that electricity thing. There could be a natural process there that we just don't understand yet. It doesn't need to be designed. Or so it wouldn't be reasonable to say this must be designed because there could be a naturalistic process there. Now, of course, I agree that we don't know how the universe came into being. We don't know anything about what was before the universe. So it could be a god, or it could be this just another natural process, just like lightning. But the reason I don't believe in a particular god of here on earth, like the Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism, is specifically because of the problem of suffering. The reason I don't believe there is an all-good, all-powerful God like in Christianity or Islam is because if there was that kind of a God, he wouldn't have created a world that is as bad as this one.
That's interesting. Yeah. So that would be actually a good thing to get to earlier. That's a very important point. So in terms of the umbrella points and all these sorts of things related to the design of the universe, and then the way that explanations can be given. I can't remember what the saying is, but there's a saying which goes along the lines of "Give me a miracle as a first step, and then I can explain how everything else works." And the thing is that for the universe to exist the way it does, this is impossible. It's a miracle, basically. But once we have it, I can explain how it all kind of works, and I can make things linked and whatever. If you have a magician who's sitting there doing this incredibly intricate trick, you can have 101 different explanations, but there's only one explanation of how it actually happened. And so a person can be like, well, I can theorize on how we got here, but it doesn't mean that you're right. And so all these all these little, honestly, I see them as honestly like almost comical, these explanations of like the eye and so on. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, you can say, well, miraculously we have this eye, and it started from no eye, and then you can just say, well, more sensitive, two spots that are more sensitive, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, give me a break, really. Like, so that at least that's kind of how I perceive it. But anyways, that's another point altogether. But it's like, it's just it just comes from this whole perspective of, let me just put aside the miracle factor, and I'll explain technically how it works. In terms of the lightning rod thing, which is an interesting point, because you're talking about people looked at lightning and they were looking at the cause external to the universe. And then you said we found answers internal in the universe. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Yeah, people did not understand internally or externally. And so, although some understood externally, those obviously believe in the creator, but that doesn't mean that the creator is specifically that there was like a fork and then, zap and so on. But internally, we began to understand. I think that's one of the problems when people talk about science. They talk about, science answers everything. No, science answers the internal functionality of the universe. It can't answer what comes from the outside. At that point, you're just, you can't, science doesn't answer that. It's a different process that answers that. You have to look at the nature of the universe and try to understand, well, can this universe exist the way it does without something prior to it? And you go from there. But science analyzes, when you look at the lightning and you understand electromagnetism and all these things, yeah, okay, fine, that's internal. That has nothing to do with the topic of the creator himself. Now, if people said, well, the creator controls this, well, you have to have an evidence for that. So that's why for us as Muslims, when we say something is caused by God, we have to have an evidence for that. The Creator tells us what he specifically causes and what is, essentially what, for example, is caused by us. There's lots of verses that say that this is from you and this is from God. So this was because of your choices and this is because of God specifically doing this. And so that's another thing. Obviously, it opens up a whole other topic. But in terms of the viewpoint of suffering, and how can God create a world that has so much suffering? There's two very important things to understand. Actually, three. First of all, Islam is not the same as Christianity in this regard. We don't believe that God is all loving. We don't believe that God is all merciful, right? So we believe the Creator of the universe has created a world that has the potential for immense good and immense suffering. And so the God, the Creator of the universe can he can create obviously any variation that he wants, but to create a simple dichotomy is he could create a world that has absolutely no suffering, and a world that has a world that's completely perfect, and a world that has suffering and problems, or even completely drowning in suffering. And so the question is that why would the Creator create a world that has suffering in it? Now, of course, because he can create a world that has no suffering, which is, we obviously know that it to be heaven, which is a reward for good actions. So Islam says that this world was specifically, and going back to the whole thing about all the imperfect swords and the perfect sword, this world was specifically set for man to come down to and live on. Although dinosaurs pre-existed that, so we believe in dinosaurs. Some Christians obviously don't. But this place was specifically set as a place for us to live on, for us to be given free will and the ability to choose our actions. Now, there's a lot more detail to that, but essentially we have the ability to choose good and evil, and we're left mostly to our own devices within our realm of free will. Now, the Creator, of course, would interferes, I guess, if you want to use that word. So he's involved. He'll stop us from doing certain things and be involved in our lives to insert certain things. We called tests, we call them fitna, we call them calamities, and so on. So we look at that as being from the Creator. So the purpose of us being here is to be tested in doing good and evil, and the dominance of evil and suffering in this world is not because the Creator is causing that suffering. It's because he put the responsibility on those of us who are good in this world to not let it happen. And if we become complacent and just sit in our homes and do nothing and leave politics and military matters and so on to the corrupt of this world, we're the cause of this, not the Creator, because he made this into a world. It's not different from a place where, again, for us, a drastically tiny example in comparison is if you have like an MMA fight, and it's a fight to the point of a guy getting choked out, and you're saying, oh, well, there's so much suffering in this. This is wrong. There's no way that this could be done by a human being. It's like, well, the point of it is for them to fight until somebody wins. So you're not going to stop it. Oh, no, he got punched in the face. Stop it. There's too much suffering. We can't allow this. So that's the thing, is that it is very important to understand context of a purpose. The purpose of this is for us to be tested. And the Creator has identified to us in the Quran that there is a significantly less accountability for people who have suffered. So a child who dies before puberty goes straight to heaven. A parent who had a child who died before they reach puberty has the child walk up to them and take them by the hand and walk them into heaven. A person who dies from drowning dies a martyr. A person who dies from a building falling on them dies a martyr. A martyr goes straight to heaven after they die. So there's lots and lots of details that talk about what happens to those who suffer. A person who's wealthy, the Prophet explained that the people who are good and who are wealthy will crawl very slowly and painfully across. There's a bridge between your accountability and heaven, and so you it's very painful and you get dragged across. Whereas if you are poor, you run across and your legs it's what they call, your legs are set free and they're very light. And so there's lots of descriptions that talk about the accountability on the Day of Judgment. Every single person will be made to stand, and every single thing you've ever done will be put in front of you, and you'll have to go through every single thing that you've done. Some people will be allowed straight into heaven, some people will go straight to hell, and some people will be held accountable. So in terms of what we're doing here on this earth, it's just that the Islam identifies that we're all here to be accounted, and the Creator of the universe is not unjust. So he knows the measures of the accountability and what's fair, and then he'll judge everyone accordingly.
All right, so the first thing is, on evolution, all of that stuff that I mentioned, we can prove all of that. Like we can demonstrate it in a lab. So that's not just fictitious umbrella terms. Like that's actually demonstrable. But of course, I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I can't actually explain that because it's not my profession. But the second point on the problem, when you said God is just, now, for me, it seems God is really, really unjust if he exists. Because if you force people to live on this world with all of this suffering without their choosing, like if I didn't volunteer to be a part of this world, then he has forced me into it without my consent, which would be like slavery. So it seems like if there was that kind of a being, then he would be very unjust, very immoral to force me into this without my consent.
So yeah, so in terms of what was the first point you said? I think my note here is too short.
Evolution is demonstrable. We can show it in a lab. We
Oh,
can
right,
prove
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so you're saying all of it. Okay, I think that's a bit of a big word. I think
Oh yeah, I mean,
some of
I'm
it.
specifically referring to like the evolution of the eye. We can go through the entire evolution of the eye. You're right. We can't do all of it. All of it. That's too
Yeah.
broad.
And even then, it's not, you can't demonstrate, it can't show it demonstrably how cells can detect light and then transform. That's all just, obviously just a theory. And
No,
in
no,
terms of
we
saying,
can
well,
demonstrate that. We can actually demonstrate that.
what do you mean?
Like we can actually do that in a lab and show how cells form in order to be more susceptible to light and to be able to evolve in order to form the eye. We have each and every stage. We can do that. We can literally do that in a lab.
So still, maybe we have to have this conversation after I go and watch these videos, because for me, what I would suspect is that they will take cells in a very controlled environment that is very conducive to, if you just take random cells from a body and put this in front of light, and to say that there's some way of proving that these cells can somehow in time not only detect warmth, but process light intelligently and usefully and understand depth and so on. No, you cannot. There's no way of doing that in a lab. But okay, I'll accept that, and I'll look into it. That's perfectly fine.
Fair enough.
So the now in terms of the issue of the creator being unjust, this is an interesting topic, because actually the creator now. So I'm not agreeing that it's unjust, but the creator, that Allah in the Quran specifically says, he calls us his slaves. So we are called his ibad, those who, meaning much more specifically, those who worship him. But ibad even refers to his creation, so those who are created by him. And so we are his slaves in that he created us and he controls every single variable around us. And I think that here's an interesting thing, is that I think, going back to the topic of there's an unwillingness, I think most, if not pretty much almost all people who I have met who don't believe in a creator, who didn't almost relatively quickly accept the existence of a creator. Because I've met people in the past who said, no, there's no creator. I had a conversation or two and they're like, okay, yeah, there's a creator. And then they kind of move on because there's a willingness. But those who are really unwilling, there's a resentment, right? And so what has to be understood is that you were allowed to exist. Okay. So it's kind of like children being born into this world and being hateful and rude and even, like spitting in the face of their parents every day. Oh, because, well, I didn't choose to be in this world and you brought me into this world without my choosing, and I have the right now to treat you like garbage. And it's like, no, you should be appreciative because your parents fed you and clothed you and taught you and protected you and so on. And so the thing is that if a child is born handicapped and you're like, oh, well, X, Y, and Z, of course, then that goes into the question of, obviously, parents can't control that. But the point is that, so the creator creating people living and suffering and so on, in the context of accountability on the day of judgment, you realize that these people are in a better position than you and I are. You and I are in a lot of trouble for our capabilities. We're able to do a lot of things,
Who's in a better
especially our
position?
mental faculty.
You said
you and I.
Who's in a better
position than somebody who's handicapped
Oh,
or
okay. Gotcha.
or is very poor and so on, because we have so much resources available to us to do things, and we're going to be questioned. What did you do with your wealth? What did you do with your health? What did you do with your intelligence? What did you do with your education? What did you do with your mind when you're analyzing the world? Obviously, in these types of discussions. So the thing is that the creator gave us the opportunity to actually exist and to be able to enjoy life, and he told us that he will give us eternal heaven, but after we're tested. He wants to allow us into heaven, eternal heaven, as a reward. So an unlimited gift, a reward for something that's limited in time, which is you have a very short period of time where you just get to make choices. And those choices, whether you like it or not, you're in the situation. But even if you don't like it, you have to stop and realize the fact that I actually get to enjoy anything is because the Creator brought me into existence. And he gave me this fully functional body that actually isn't, this is another thing sometimes I talk about, which is that, like if the Creator wanted, he could make every single pain sensor in our body hurt. He can make every single thing hurt at maximum, but he doesn't, right? So you're not in all that pain. And so for you to not appreciate that, that's what I'm saying, is that it's to recognize that if there's a resentment towards the idea that a creator exists because there's suffering in this world, or because, I didn't ask for it. Well, the thing is that shows an incredible lack of appreciation for the fact that he allowed you to exist and gave you a body and is giving you opportunity to enjoy life, especially since you're living in a comfortable part of the world, but to enjoy life and then to be rewarded with an even greater reward after you pass away if you make good decisions in your life. And so from that perspective, I guess I don't really, I totally disagree with the idea that the creator would be unjust in that regard, because he's giving us a gift that you can't even give anything. Like you're unable to give the gift of life to anything at all. Even in terms of birth, you're bound by the rules that he gives, including the rule that you have to have a spouse, right? So that's the thing, like a woman, I mean. And so, and so that's the, I guess that's, I don't know if you have any response to that.
Well, first question is, if we were able to create life in a lab, would that challenge your belief?
Create life in a lab?
Yeah, like just completely just create a living cell from just inorganic material. Would that challenge your belief?
No, not at all, because you're taking things that have rules in it that allow for something like that to exist. So, the only way that it would exist if you would bring something that, the creator of the universe says can never work, and then you make it work, then that would make a question the religion. But for you to take objects in this universe and make living things out of it, well, yes, that's how he designed things to function. So no, that wouldn't affect things.
Okay, I asked because there are many Christians who believe that that's impossible and that's something that only God could do. So
no, we don't. Islam says, like I said, because we believe in the idea of, we believe in dinosaurs. We don't believe the Earth has only existed for 6,000 years. We believe that cloning is permissible when with animals. So therefore research and that kind of thing is allowed when it comes to animals. In Islam, it forbids cloning for humans because lineage and procreation is a very restricted thing, and so it's forbidden. We're not allowed to do it, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't do it. We don't say we couldn't do it, because obviously we know that we can.
Okay, to pick up on the problem of suffering thing again. So from my perspective, it seems really unjust, especially because God's all-knowing, right? In your perspective?
Yes, of course.
So he knows what we're going to do before we do it. And so he puts us into this world. There's many people who will choose to not like it and choose to have resentment and rebel. And he does that knowingly, forcing them into this suffering, which they would not want to be in, and then forces them again into hell of some kind, correct?
Well, that's the thing, is that it depends on his judgment on the matter. So there's people who will live in suffering and so on, and then they go to heaven, and that's the consolation for them, and that's a pretty good consolation. But in terms of him bringing, sorry, there's the first point you made, and I forget what it is.
There's some people that he brings into existence who he knows are going to suffer and who are going to resent and rebel.
Oh, right, yeah. So in terms of him being all-knowing, this is obviously we get into a bit of a tricky discussion here, but it's simply put, the creator knows what happens after it happens, not after it happens. I'm not saying like he doesn't know and then he knows, but it's that the thing has to happen for him to know that it's going to happen. So for us now, of course, he knows what's going to happen even if it doesn't happen, but he has chosen to allow us to exist, and he gave us the free will, and that free will is not controlled by him. So to say, well, because he knew, therefore he should have stopped it. The thing is that defeats the purpose of why. Like, it's not for you to decide why he should create people and what the rules should be bound by. He has decided, and he brought you into existence, and he told you, whether you like it or not, these are the rules, and you have to abide by them. And if you don't abide by them, then you get punished. You resenting it doesn't mean he doesn't exist. You see what I'm saying? Like, for somebody to be like, well, I have a really, really, really mean dad, and he's a drunk and he beats the crap out of me every single day, he doesn't exist, or he's not my dad. And the answer is no, he's still your dad. You don't get to just because you resent something, it doesn't mean that you get to reject a fact of existence. And that's why what I'm saying is that sometimes people have to deal with that first and just be willing to accept the existence of a creator despite their not liking existing or not liking that they're suffering.
Oh, you're
Because
right. Those are two different questions. Whether or not he exists and whether or not he's good are two different questions. You're absolutely right.
yeah, and so that's why. But I think that sometimes it affects people much more than they maybe are aware of, which is that they sometimes when I get into conversations, I'm not necessarily saying this applies to you, but I've noticed that sometimes when I'm discussing with somebody, it's really much more about their dislike for religion and their dislike for the idea of a creator exists and he tells them what to do, or a creator exists and I don't like how things are, and therefore I'm going to find an alternative to my belief in his existence. And so that has to be dealt with almost as at the same priority as the proof of the existence of the creator. And honestly, I would say with you is that when a person kind of drops into neutral and it's kind of like, well, I don't know, and I can't know, and I'm not going to know, and it kind of seems like maybe the second topic is a bit of a more of a priority at that point in time, because you're obviously a very smart person. You've researched things, and the intellect, sometimes you got to be careful from not overcomplicating things, because I know people I know a lot of people who've overcomplicated things and then they just wreck everything. Like I've come across people who had very sound understanding of direct rational reality, and they got caught up in all these philosophical theories. And once you get lost in all these theories, and I'm not talking about like atheism and so on. I'm talking about like interpretations of the Quran. A person will take a verse that talks about, like, there's a verse in the Quran that says that when one of the prophets, Dhul-Qarnayn, was walking, and then he saw the sun setting in a boiling pond. And so then somebody is like, well, there's no way this is from God, because there's no way that the sun sets in a boiling pond. And it's like you're thinking about this really irrationally. Very simply, it's a figure of speech, meaning he was walking. It could be that he saw the sun setting and he saw a boiling pond, and that's the point that he stopped and turned around and gone. There's an event that took place. There could be a lot of different in Arabic. There's lots of figures of speech, and then there's other things related to all sorts of different topics related to the unseen and related to the future and so on. But yeah, it just comes down to this one issue of, that's why I talk about simplifying things and get away from these, like talking about, like even arguing about like atoms and molecules. Like, we don't see these things. Yes, we know mostly how they function, but there's lots of things that we're finding out are not true, like how an atom, how the electrons function. We've now realized a number of things that are different that from what I learned when I was a teenager. And so there's lots of things that we're learning. So you can't really base your entire viewpoint on creation based on things like quantum mechanics and these sorts of things, because it's like you're taking a risk that maybe you're not right about this. But when you look simply in terms of, well, can this universe exist, eternally all on its own and design itself and bring itself all the rules together and maintain things all completely on their own, without anything managing it, the mind at least should have some trouble accepting that kind of an argument and recognize that, yeah, it's, at least it's, acceptable, if not likely, that this had to have been created by a creator. Obviously, I firmly believe that it's absolutely 100% certain. There's absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. And I realize that the more time I spend, and this is one of the reasons why I'm really, really understanding, sorry for talking for so long, but this is one of the reasons why I'm really, really understanding, and of course, the creator might be obviously different, but for me, I look at it as, I understand that the more you look at the world from the perspective of it's designed, the more you recognize that it's designed. I'm not saying that the more you blind yourself, because that's obviously how maybe some Christians say, the more you're willing to accept the Bible, the more you believe in it. Yeah, but there's contradictions in that. There's no way, for example, that the creator would be on a cross and say, myself, why have I forsaken myself? Like that's something that it can't be that God would do that. But when you're talking about consistency in the universe, you look at every single thing and how everything is designed, like, the way that plants and the plant cell structure and humans and cell structure, these are things that have to have been put together, right? And so the more you look at it, the more you realize. And I think there was even a saying by a scientist who became religious, actually, after he was an atheist, and he said that when you first study science, the first part of it or something, you'll be an atheist, but when you reach the inner depths of science and biology and chemistry and so on, God is waiting there for you. And essentially, I see it more along the lines of you'll really recognize that, yeah, this can't just just be here completely by chance. There has to be a designer behind it. And one last thing, in university, when I was I spoke to my I think it was a biology think it was a biology professor, and I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And I remember he was an atheist. So we had a conversation. I told him that, like, like, really? So because we had a lot more time, and so we went through just so much detail about the design of all of what we were even studying in class. And in the end, he said, I recognize that there has to be something behind all of this, but I'm just not willing to say that it's a creator. Right. And so I find that it's very consistent all across the board. There's that kind of like, yeah, I get it. There has to be something behind this, but I don't really know what it is. And so that answer shows an unwillingness more than a rational, because reasonably you can say, well, yeah, well, obviously something designed this. Okay, whatever that thing is, we'll call it God. Or if you don't want to call it God, just call it a creator. But anyways, I've gone on for quite a bit, but yeah, that's essentially. I guess. Sorry, one more thing, which is that I would recommend that you take a bit of time looking into Islam. From what I've kind of gathered from some of the things that you said, would I be right to assume that you've never actually studied Islam or looked into it?
I have read a little bit of the Quran and some of the Hadith, but I haven't researched it as much because most of the time I spend debating with Christians, and so I spend a lot more time looking into the Christian religion. But yeah, I definitely, if I can get more Muslims to engage and debate with me, I'll definitely be researching it more in order to talk with them about their perspective.
Yeah, so because that's the thing, is that, like, we discuss something that is neutral really to essentially everybody. We're talking about the origin of the universe, but then when we talk about Islam is a little bit different, and that's why if I'm right, like, if there's an element of resistance to the idea that there's a creator because of a resentment or a dislike towards the idea, and then that also is influencing a particular direction of thought, it's very, very important. And I find that actually, I believe the vast majority of atheists in the world are caused by Christianity. The fact that somebody would like I used to have a computer store in a city called Elmer, and Elmer is a city. It's like almost 100% Christian. There's, I think, one Muslim in that entire city, with exception of me and my wife at the time. And so my wife, because my wife is a convert, and so we moved close to her family. We had a store there, and I had Christians coming in, every single day, coming to save me, essentially, and pastors and activists and laymen and so on. And what I found very consistent with all of them, including the very knowledgeable ones, is they made a very clear point that the more you think about the Bible, the less you're going to accept it. And it was just a very consistent thing that they were very open about. They had no embarrassment about this. Like, no, this is a blind faith religion. You don't think about things. You just accept the Bible, you believe in it, and you just go. And you hope that you're going to heaven, and that's basically, you can feel it inside. So Islam completely rejects this idea. Islam says, no, you're not even allowed to believe in anything unless you have 100% proof for it, including beliefs in Islam itself. And that's the thing. So Islam is a very, very intellectual religion, including the political systems. So maybe the next time we get together, we could actually have a discussion about the political systems of Islam.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that.
Yeah, and if you want, actually, I can send you maybe some literature that if you're interested in reading,
Sure.
I can send that to you.
Sure.
And but yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that Islam is interesting because I've studied the political systems of Islam for 20 years, and I'm subconsciously, not subconsciously even, but slightly consciously, always looking for a gap. I'm always looking for some human error in any of the solutions, because I study it so intensely and I discuss it so much. Like literally tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of discussions over the past 20 years. And so I've found that the more I discuss it, the more it's just, I'm now looking for just one single problem, just so I can say, see, there's a human error in it. Not that I'm questioning Islam, but that's how my conviction gets, obviously, it remains very, very strong, because the more you study the political systems, and what I mean by that is the solutions of Islam, you realize that these solutions could not have come from a human being. And you can only know that by studying it. So there's no other religion that has anything even remotely close to what Islam has in terms of these types of solutions. So when you study these things, and you begin to realize that, yeah, these are actually solutions that a human being could not have foreseen that this would solve problems. There's problems that I've seen after I applied the rule. Then I realized I didn't even realize this solves this problem, and it actually solves it. Not to mention the consistency and the lack of, even legal theory today. It's all about the gaps. It's all about finding loopholes. Whereas in Islam, there's absolutely no loopholes. If there's a loophole, there's a text that says this is the loophole, or this is the exception, essentially. So maybe one day we can actually have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So you brought up a lot of points there. First thing I'd like to start with would be, when your professor said that there has to be something all behind this, I mean, I agree. Science doesn't answer the fundamental questions. It only answers some of the questions that we can really ask with the limited tools we have right now. So there has to be something behind it all. It has to be some necessary thing. I agree with that. I just don't think it has to be an intelligence. I think just like when we thought fairy circles were caused by an intelligence, but we were wrong because it was a natural process, or when we thought lightning was caused by an intelligence, but we were wrong, it was a natural process, or when we saw that the planet was caused by an intelligence, but oh, that was also produced by a natural process. I think we can keep going backwards with this pattern and say, yeah, it's probably whatever caused the universe, whatever caused everything that we see around us to exist, that could also be a natural process. It's just a necessary natural process. Uh,
Yeah,
the
but
the second thing you said,
okay.
um, talking about the problem of evil again. For me, the way I see the two issues as different issues. One is that whether or not I like a God, and two is that do the philosophical arguments work. I really enjoy philosophy, so I like talking about the philosophical arguments just because I enjoy them. And the fact that I don't like a God doesn't play a role in that for me. It's true that if the world was created in the way you described it, I would not like that God. I think that God would be evil from my perspective, completely immoral, and I would never want to worship that kind of a God because, from my definition, I believe in objective morality. That God would be objectively immoral. It would be something we would not want to worship. It would be something we'd want to stay away from as much as possible. But I don't let that influence my philosophical arguments because those are kind of like playing chess. I like playing chess because it's fun to look at the patterns, and the arguments for the philosophical side are more like those patterns kinds of things. And whether or not I like a God is kind of like a different topic for me.
Okay. So, with regards to natural processes, and you're saying that like the people saw lightning and then they thought there was intelligence behind it, and that kind of doesn't parallel with this because unless you're saying that you can say that lightning is caused by something and something is caused by something and that something is something, and then that just goes on forever and ever and infinitely. And do you believe that?
No, I think that there can be a final starting point which is necessary, just like you believe God is necessary. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing, just without the consciousness.
Sure, and so that's the thing. So that's why there's, so that's why we can't say that, well, people thought that lightning came from specific, like directly from something intelligent. Yes, okay, that's obviously wrong. But even if somebody concluded that, well, that's obviously just not having access to the information. But when we talk about the process of lightning and all the laws within the universe that allow for that lightning bolt to exist, then from that perspective, now we're talking differently, because you're talking about one process within the universe and you're saying, well, they found that wrong and therefore we can kind of extrapolate from that to the universe. No, because the universe, we're talking about something. So that is science. This is different. This is external to what science can analyze. And so when you look at, well, where did all this come from? Then we talk about intelligence or non-intelligent. That's a little bit different.
Well, just to respond to that really quickly,
Yeah.
from my perspective, you're right. Science doesn't answer those questions. It only answers some questions. But every question we've had answered is natural process, natural process, natural process, natural process, just all the way down the line. All the things we've discovered are just natural processes. So it seems reasonable to conclude that the next thing that we don't know, like where the universe came from, that could also just be a natural process.
Well, no, because then you're not answering the question, because you're talking about within the universe. Yes, there's a natural process within the universe to another natural process within the universe, but we're talking about at the end point of the universe. So where did all these natural processes come from? If you just say it's another natural process, then that's within the universe, right? Because natural processes necessarily exist within the universe.
Oh, no, I
Prior
totally
to the universe.
totally disagree with that. So it's definitely possible because there's lots of stuff we don't know about nature. Like you said about the electron, we just discovered certain things, like it goes in little blob shapes rather than a circle around the proton. There are lots of things we don't know about nature. And one of the things that we don't know is, could there be a natural thing outside of the universe which is independent and necessary? And that's a possibility. You can't say that's impossible because we don't know what's impossible. We don't know everything. So it's definitely a possibility.
That there's something external to the universe that is what?
Like a natural process that is independent of the universe and necessary, like kind of like what you believe a God is just a natural, necessary thing.
Yes, but then we go back to the topic of, does it have intelligence, non-intelligence? Can something exist with all these boundaries and restrictions and still exist eternally? And again, still, I obviously, yeah. But again, not to go back, but I'm just simply saying that for then that natural process can't go back and infinitely, or it cannot just be from a natural process to another. You have to stop at some point. So you could say the natural process from which all other natural processes originate. Okay, fine. But then it's just one thing, right? So it's one thing that had all the data included in it. It's just like a gigantic database with all the rules in it, and it just was there. And then suddenly, the universe comes from it. Then that's a whole other topic. But I'm talking about to say that that thing came from another natural process, at that point in time, you're going to infinite regression. So now we're talking nonsense at this point in time. So
well, I see. When you describe a God, I see you as saying the same thing. There are a whole bunch of these rules, like the God is all powerful and all knowing, and has free will and has just and all these things. Like he couldn't be unjust, right? Can he choose to be unjust?
Justice is a relative term, right? So justice is whatever he defines the justice to be. So that's another topic.
Okay, so but it seems like you're applying all of these properties that the God has, and I'm just doing the same thing and applying the properties to pantheism. No, I don't have any problem with saying, like I don't see the contradiction in saying that there's things, the laws it applies by, or the limitations. Like I see the idea of God being the properties that you've described as the limitation. I think it's just a linguistic game there. I don't see a difference between those two things. But yeah, that's going back to all the things we've already talked about.
Yeah. I guess we're just gonna go back in circles. So, and then as far as talking about suffering and that the creator would be immoral, and so what I'm I guess we're kind of going back to the original point, which is that there was an additional point that I actually had in mind, but maybe if I explain the point, it'll come back. But the idea that to say that the creator is immoral for him to allow suffering to exist, is that what you're saying?
Oh, no. I'm saying it's immoral for him to force us into a world of suffering without our consent. So it's totally fine. Allowing suffering to exist, I'm fine with. It's the forcing us to suffer against our will, which I'm not fine with.
Yeah, but how can suffering exist if we aren't forced into this world?
What do you like? We could voluntarily choose to experience suffering, and so
But
suffering.
then you'd have to be created somewhere else.
Right. So God could essentially, because you believe we have souls, correct? Supposed to go to heaven and hell. So He can create the soul and say, "Hey, soul, here is a world. Would you like to live in this world?" And we can be like, "No, I don't like that."
Yeah. So there's two interesting things about that. So here's a whole other topic actually that opens up. So I guess maybe again we can get into this. So this is about Islam specifically. So the thing is, when it comes to the matters of the unseen, there are things that the Creator has told us in the Quran and in the narrations of the Prophet that identify some details about what happened in the past. For example, there's a verse in the Quran that says that Allah presented the trust, which is free will, to the mountains, and the mountains refused. But mankind accepted the ability to have free will. Truly, mankind is ignorant. And then there's another, there's a saying from the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the way, you know what that means, right? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Have you heard that before? It means peace be upon him.
Yeah.
And so where he says that every single soul that is created is asked, what are you going to do? And how are you going to live? So when the soul is created, it is actually, whether you remember it or not, it's saying that there was a period of, reminders of telling you, what you're going to do in this world. But putting all that aside, still the point is that if we were to be created in heaven and to be asked, hey, do you want to leave heaven and go to earth where you're going to be tested and be put through trials and have to make choices of good and evil and be pitted against the devil who's going to be whispering in your ear to do bad things and so on, nobody in their right mind is going to say yes. The point is the Creator has made a decision on our behalf in order to make the reward of heaven valuable, like actually worthy. So a person, that's the thing, is that like Hitler would have been in heaven, right? Stalin would have been in heaven. Like these dirtbags who would have definitely chosen to massacre millions and rape all these rapists, all these, George Bush, Donald Trump, you name them, Saddam Hussein, like these people were monsters when given free choice. And these people would be allowed to live in heaven for eternity. So the Creator, obviously, He knows the nature, He knows the future and so on. And without getting into how He knows and so on, but the point is that He put us in a position where we actually chose to do the right thing, and He and the Creator of the universe will reward us for that. And those who chose to do wrong, they won't be rewarded with heaven. They'll be punished for their choices. But I'm just saying that we have the capability of recognizing these things. We have the capability of recognizing what is moral and immoral. The very fact that you even talk about morality indicates that, we have the ability to recognize these things. And so therefore you can choose to live a moral life, or you can choose to live an immoral life. Whether you choose to resent the Creator and reject His authority and so on, that's another thing. But I'm just talking about the fact that we recognize these ideas of morality and immorality. And so it goes to show that this world, there's an element that if you were to look at it from the perspective there's a creator and there's a test, well, it makes perfect sense. From the perspective of everything is perfectly designed and all the rules are set and the laws of physics they're stable, and there's good and evil, and we can choose to fight evil and work against it and change it, or we can choose to join evil, or we can choose to remain silent over evil. Have you ever heard that example of does cold exist?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure I don't know if you like it or dislike it. But that's the thing, is that cold doesn't exist. It's the absence of heat, and evil exists due to the absence of good people in this world. So the suffering that exists in this world is because we're not doing enough. The people who've chosen to live a good life or to make good choices, and may Allah keep us on that path. We've not done enough to manage this world in a way where the people who are suffering stop suffering.
So my response would be like, if God forced us to live here against our will, to me that's immediately immoral. That can't be moral. That God must be evil. The only thing that a just God could do would be to allow us to choose for ourselves the world we want to live in. So, for example, he could say, here's your soul. You can choose to go to live in this world or not. And if you choose not to, like if Hitler chose not to come to this world, well, then he hasn't killed anybody, so he hasn't done anything immoral, even though he's a terrible person. So I'd be okay with him being in heaven if he hasn't killed anybody, even if he's a terrible person. He should have that choice. He should be able to choose for himself to come to this world and be an evil person, or to not come to this world. And forcing him to come to this world against his will means, well, it's kind of your fault, because you forced him in here, and so he's going to do this because you forced him in here. So from my perspective, if there was a just God, what he would have done is what he said, he would have given us a choice between a whole bunch of different worlds. He said, you could go to this world with the one we experience right now with all the suffering, or you can go to one with a little less suffering or a little less suffering. It's kind of up to you. You can go to a world where you are Luke Skywalker and you play Star Wars if you want to. Go for it. If there was really a just God, that's what it would have done. And the fact that he forced us into this world against our will seems really, really bad. I couldn't worship that kind of a God because it seems so evil to me.
But still, you're ignoring the fact that him forcing us into this world does not mean that he forced us to choose to do wrong. So if you're forced into a world that is full of suffering and you choose to live a good life, despite the fact that the easier thing to do is to be corrupt, you made that choice. He didn't force you to do that either. The same as if you chose to join in and just be a corrupt jerk and just steal everyone's money or just hurt people or whatever, then you chose that too, and he didn't force you to do that too. The point is that he made this world and he put us in it, and it's for him to know the reasons for that. Like, we might not know, we might only know a portion of the reasoning behind it. But if we recognize that there is a creator and we recognize that he created us, then the only choice that we have is to appreciate the fact that he allowed us to exist and to live a good life and to accept what we've been put in. That's the only option that we have. For you to say, for a person to say, I'm not saying obviously that you say this, but for a person to say there is a creator, but I resent him and I reject him because of he put me in a world where I don't like it. Well, that's obviously nonsense, or that would be a nonsensical response, because you have no choice but to accept the fact that you exist in this world, right? So it doesn't matter whether you like him or not, and he's telling you he controls literally hell, literally heaven. You don't do what he says, he's going to punish you. So at this point in time, well, okay, you can do it begrudgingly. Just go ahead and do what you're told. But that's the point, is you're in prison. And that's the thing. Even the Prophet ﷺ specifically said, this world is the prison of the believer and the heaven of the disbeliever. Right? You can do whatever you want as a disbeliever. There's no authority, no one telling you what to do. But as a believer, as a Muslim, this is a prison, right? Because you're bound by rules. So it doesn't matter whether or not you like the prison guards. It doesn't matter if you think that you were, the judge put you in jail for a little bit too long or something like this. At the end of the day, you're in jail. So you either accept it or you have your kneecaps broken by the guard. So that's the problem, is that you're in a situation that you kind of you don't have any choice but to accept it. And to understand that this place is a very, very serious testing place. Like there's verses in Islam where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, look at the design of the alternating of the sun and the night and day, and the design of yourselves, etc. He names a number of things, and he says that, do you think that we created all of this playing games? Right? So Allah is telling us, or God is telling us, that He didn't create this as a game or as something light. It's a very, very serious place of being tested, and really terrible things are going to happen, or really great things are going to happen, and it's up to us whether we decide we're going to make right choices or wrong choices, and we'll be rewarded or punished accordingly. But again, I think it's just that it's kind of, I guess what I'm saying is that it's kind of a moot point to even talk about whether or not you like the creator or not, because whether you are right about your perspective or whether you're wrong about your perspective means absolutely nothing, because at the end of the day, if you are created by a creator, you have to do exactly what he says. And if you're not created by a creator, well, then this whole entire conversation was a gigantic waste of time.
Oh, right. Well, so my argument is, I'm saying, because you believe your God to be just, and I'm saying if your God was just, then this world, the way it's been created, proves there can't be a just God. There's a contradiction there. And so if this world is unjust, then your God can't be just, and therefore your God can't exist, because you've just said he is just.
But why can't justice be to be first tested and then to be rewarded with heaven through doing something that is somewhat deserving of heaven instead of just being put in heaven? How is it just to be given eternal heaven for doing absolutely nothing?
No, it would be just to give people the option to choose to be tested. It's unjust to force them to be tested without their consent. That's unjust.
But still, the point is that you're like, the only other option for a person to not be tested would be to be obliterated into non-existence. So let me ask you a question. If you had the choice, you're being given a choice right then and there by the creator, go to this world and that there's suffering in it, and if you make good choices and you be a good person and you follow my instructions, and these instructions aren't like rip your arms off, but they're like get married, and have children and be good to your children and don't kill anybody and don't lie and don't steal and pray to me 5 times a day, and do good things, remember the good things that I've done, say thank you every time you eat something, or some simple things like this, do that and I'll give you eternal heaven, or I'll obliterate you into non-existence and you'll never get to enjoy a single thing forever, because you won't even exist anymore.
Right, I'd say both of those are unjust, and if a God forced me to choose between one of those, that God is unjust, and so
okay, well then give me an option that will be just. What's a just option?
I go to my own universe. Go to your own universe, do whatever you want. Go.
Okay, so that means that's heaven. Okay, so let's say you get to go to heaven. So
I wouldn't say that's necessarily heaven.
Believe me, if you want to be floating in a universe without food, right?
Well, I would choose, like you said, you played video games like The Sims, right? In video games, you can turn the difficulty up and make things harder on yourself. And if I went to my own universe, it would kind of be like a video game where there would be suffering. There just wouldn't be Hitler. If there would be suffering, you would still have.
So if you got to choose your world, you would choose a world with suffering?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be like a video game. I love video games. Don't you?
No, but you don't get to control the video game. You have to suffer in it, because you have to remove the element of control. Because now all of a sudden you're saying, well, now you're a quote unquote God in your own universe. We're not talking about that. That's not the option that that's not just. Why the hell would God give you your own universe? You didn't deserve this. You didn't earn it. You didn't spend years of like suffering and difficulty and no, even you won't even know how to run a universe in the first place. I'm saying, like, if you were to, or your own little planet. I'm saying that he brought you into existence and gave you the opportunity of enjoying life and enjoying an afterlife, and he told you all you got to do is worship me, and all you got to do is recognize that I created you and thank me for it and live a good life according to my instructions, and I'll let you live in heaven for eternity, because what I'm asking you to do won't be that easy, okay? Or you don't deserve anything and I'm going to make you non-existent, because that would be unjust. How would it be just for God to create something and give me eternal heaven, and he's done literally nothing for it? Right, and of course, I believe that if God decided that, of course, I would obviously say that I would see it as being just, because the creator can do whatever he wants. But I'm still saying that the point is the creator put you on this earth for you to prove to him that you will make good decisions, and that when you go to heaven, you went to heaven because you'll be talking about the things that you did. Right, like I helped people, I did things that, and that's actually how the Quran describes it. People will be on thrones made of emeralds and gold and jewels, and they'll be talking to each other, and their face will be glowing, and they'll be smiling, end to end, and they'll be talking about their life to each other, right? And they'll be honored based on the things that they've done that was honorable. So those who are died martyrs and things like this, they're at a much, much higher level of honor than those who just lived a simple life and so on. But as long as you stay away from bad, you're still honored. And so, or as long as you've done enough good, generally speaking. And so that's the thing, is that for you to be in that kind of position where you've somewhat earned, because you can't earn an eternal heaven, but you've somewhat earned your position with God, that's just because you've done something for it. So you're in this world where there's lots of suffering, and really, again, you in a position where you're living in one of the most, you're living probably among the 0.001 wealthiest, most comfortable people in the world, and you know, 0.001%. I don't know if I said percent of the most comfortable people in the world, and you are complaining about suffering. If there's people who I know who have lived in poverty their entire lives and they don't complain about anything. They just say Alhamdulillah. They say thank you to Allah the whole entire time, because they recognize that I'll give you just one small example. There's a famous Muslim in history. What happened is that he was a cripple in some way. I think he actually was a paraplegic, and he was blind as well, I think. And he was always mumbling something under his breath. And so somebody walked up to him and said, and listened carefully to what he was saying, and they heard him saying, Alhamdulillah alladhi afani mimma ibtala kathira min ibadah. So all thanks is to Allah, or thank you and praise to Allah and to God for giving me and protecting me with what He has afflicted His other creation with. So a person asked him, Allah has taken so much from you. Your legs don't work. You're blind. You're so physically weak. And he said, I have less opportunity to do bad things, and therefore I'm less accountable. So the thing is that these are people who recognize that even the things that God has taken from them is a blessing for them, because they have less to be held accountable for. And that's so if you're arguing the topic of justice, well, there's a whole perspective on this, that if there is a creator and he creates the world for a particular purpose, for struggling and for proving yourself, well, yes, and to say that, well, I didn't choose this, well, there's no really other alternative. Either he just never created you, and therefore he wouldn't create anybody, because nobody's going to say, yeah, throw me in a place of suffering, or he puts you straight into heaven, and then where's the whole achievement in that? So he puts you in a world where there's suffering, and then he those who suffer more get accounted less, and those who suffer less are much more accountable, and that's justice.
Well, going back to what you said, I believe in morality. I agree with you that there is an objective morality, and my standard for that morality is that it is always immoral to force people to do things they don't consent to, no matter what. It's always immoral. So if a God forced people into this world without their consent, that is immoral. That God must be evil. And I say there are other options. Like, God could give me the option of saying, go to this world that I've designed with all the suffering to test you, or you could go to heaven with me, or you could go to your own universe that is neither heaven, not with me, and not this universe. So there are other options. You can pick your own universe, and I would pick a universe with suffering. I would, absolutely. I just wouldn't have as much suffering as in this world, because I do enjoy video games. I do enjoy the challenge. I do enjoy being tested. I don't enjoy this world. Now, the point you made about the cripple who was blind, he has every right to make that decision. If he values the existence he's been given and the challenges that he has to live through, he has that right to make that choice, but he doesn't get to make that choice for me or anybody else. Every individual should have the right to choose for themselves the world that they live in. And if God forced people to live in this world against their will, then that God must be immoral, because there is an objective morality. I agree with you on that point.
So when you say that there's, and I guess actually we do have to end soon because it's been 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Fun.
Yeah. And so the thing is that now when you're saying that it's always immoral to be forced to do things against your will, well, yeah, you're forced to do a lot of stuff against your will, follow traffic laws, take care of your kids if you have children.
Pay taxes.
Yeah, no, that's immoral. I think taxes are criminal.
I agree.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, like, you have to eat. You have to, maintain a certain level of health. There's lots of things that you have to do that are good, that are right, and you're forced to do them, and it's not immoral. It's perfectly moral. It's the moral thing to be forced. So if you have children and you're like, whatever, I'm just going to throw them outside, lock the door, I'm just going to go to sleep. Well, and the police come and grab you by the scruff of the neck and, like, what the heck are you doing? That you're being forced to do something right, and that's not immoral. It's not immoral for them to force you, unless you're like a totally like a psycho-libertarian, which I don't know. Are you?
Anarcho-liberal? No. So my position on that is that it's immoral to be forced in a world where you have those responsibilities that you didn't choose to. So you should, if I could go to my own world where I could have kids and the kids I don't need to take care of them, they can just grow up on their own and be fine, that would be more moral. the fact that I'm forced into this world where I have to have those responsibilities and those consequences I didn't volunteer to, that's immoral. So I do think that every single forcing someone to do anything they don't consent to is immoral, if you can be given the alternative of just going to your own universe with the laws that you would consent to.
Yeah, but I guess it's, and that's the thing. I find it weird that you're using the word moral to describe this, because really at the end of the day, the creator is the one who decides these things. So the creator choosing for whatever reason that he has, that he's going to create a creation and give them free will and put them on this earth and test them, and give them the opportunity of getting away from certain problems. Like, if you're born in a place where you don't like it, move somewhere nicer. That's one of the reasons actually that I find interesting. Like, for me as a Muslim, I live where I choose where I live specifically because of my Islamic responsibilities. Whether it's family responsibilities, whether it's Islamic responsibility, discussing Islam with, let's say, like in Canada, because of my language, because of the people that I know, because of, it's a place where I was born and raised, understanding the culture, all these sorts of things. So it enables me to be a particular Muslim, essentially, to undertake certain responsibilities that I believe are the priority. Now, if I wasn't a Muslim, and I've said this in the past many, many times, which I find it really, really weird how some people, it's like there are places in this world that are incredible just to be there, right? Like all across Asia, all across, parts of Africa. And it's extremely cheap to live there too. Especially a person who speaks English, you can be an English teacher part-time and live like a king. Why the hell do these people live in these parts of the world that they're unhappy in, where you can there's like an entire planet, you could spend the rest of your life traveling and still not cover 10% of it, and yet you can live a very enjoyable life, and yet they still don't. And that's the thing. So that's why whenever people say, like, this world is this and whatever, and I recognize, by the way, there's actually a saying by the Prophet that Allah himself said, that if this world is worthless to the creator of the universe, this place is a place of hardship and difficulty and suffering, we're here to be tested for a short period of time. On the day of judgment, we'll look back and we'll be asked, how long were you alive for? And we'll say a day or a part of a day. We won't even remember how many years. We'll say, I don't know, it was like a part of a day. And then they'll say, no, you were alive for 60 years. And so that's how it'll feel on the day of judgment, because it's a very, very brief period of time. But the Prophet said that if this world were to have reached the value of a mosquito's wing or the wing of a fly in our sight, like, so how little do we value a mosquito wing or a fly wing? So if it reached that value in the sight of God as the wing of a fly reaches in our sight, he would never have allowed disbelievers to even have a sip of water from it. Right? It would have been so valuable at that point in time. He wouldn't have allowed people to become millionaires or not even have a sip of water. So it's so worthless to him that he lets them run rampant, and because it's a place of hardship and difficulty. So I do recognize that this place, really is a horrible place. I know people who, like back in the day, I know people who just were always high, were always drunk because they hated this world, right? And so I know that a lot of people, there's that resentment towards the idea that, well, why the hell was I put here? And I'm not necessarily saying this is how you feel, but I'm saying I've come across a lot of people who just despise this world, and it's not because they despise God, but it's because they realize that this is a really terrible place to be. My wife Ashley said before we got married, she said that she never wanted to have kids until she became Muslim, because she said, why the hell would I bring kids into this miserable, horrible world? But once you have the perspective of Islam, you realize, okay, actually things aren't that bad. It's just it's a great place, actually, and a great opportunity to do good, and then you go to heaven for it. So if Allah wills. So that's what I'm saying, is that, like, if it, again, it all depends on your perspective, but it's just that it's an issue of, I agree with you that this world is a really a terrible place, but at the same time, to say that, well, it's immoral for God to put me here, well, no, do something about it. Right, that's the point. Like, for things change slowly, sure. Things have not always been this horrible, by the way. This might be another conversation we can have, you and I, which is that if you look at history, I don't believe that history is even close to how bad people claim it is. There were long periods of great times. Even during the greatest times, people still focus on, oh, look, there was some power struggle. Yeah, okay, there's a power struggle. Like right now, there's a power struggle in the U.S. White House, but that doesn't mean that I'm sitting here being stabbed in the face because of it. Like, I can still live my life normally. And so that's kind of how it was. People were living very comfortable, prosperous lives for a very long time, for, in many eras. But we always tend to focus on, oh, things were horrible. So either way, my point is that, Islam puts the onus on us as saying that, look, it's your responsibility to do something about this. If you want to exist, look, if you want to be brought into existence to exist, this is the condition. You got to go through the earth, and then you get to go, and be accounted for what you do. You don't like it, you have non-existence. So would you prefer to be obliterated and not to exist, and never have existed, and never have to never had this conversation in the first place, which was an enjoyable conversation, or to actually, be given the opportunity to exist, but on the condition that you live in this miserable world for a few years? And that's what I'm saying, is that from that perspective, no, that's not unjust. It's a decision of the creator for him to make. And so, and that's what I'm saying, is that be careful. I mean, obviously, if you don't believe in God at this point in time, but I'm saying in the future, think about this. Be really careful, because if this is a real barrier between you and accepting the idea that a creator exists, and then you wake up on the day of judgment, you realize that you're going to be punished in the hellfire for not, making the right decision. It's really something that it's a really silly thing to have sacrificed things for. So all I can say is, again, just as advice, and again, not that I'm saying that you should take my advice or anything like that, but I'm saying that be very, very careful to filter this out. And I would say that the way to filter it out is by hypothetically allowing yourself to love this world and love the idea that you would be tested by this creator, and then ask yourself if you believe that a creator exists. And I know that it's a weird kind of contradiction, say, well, I'm going to believe in it, but I'm saying, like, you have to find a way to filter that idea out first and be willing to accept this idea, and then see how you feel about it. Because I found that probably in most cases, maybe at least a lot of cases, people have rejected the idea of the existence of a creator because of something like this. And then once they dealt with this, suddenly they're much more accepting to the idea that, okay, yeah, no, I can see now, yeah, it's pretty obvious this universe has a designer. I mean, it's obvious. It's not some designer that has no intelligence. It's a designer. It's obvious it has intelligence. I mean, it's but anyway, so I guess we should. I'll give you the last word, obviously, and if you want to respond to anything I said.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So from my perspective, when you said that, how can God be immoral because God gets to choose what's moral and immoral, I would disagree with that part. I don't think that I think morality can be objective, independent of a God, and so we can judge God to be immoral if he does immoral things like forcing people to be in a world they didn't consent to. And so from my perspective, there is an objective morality, and we can use that to judge that the description of God provided in most religions is of a really bad guy, not a good guy who we'd want to worship, and probably one that doesn't exist, especially in the Christian religion, because they have the problem of evil. There's a contradiction in that one which doesn't exist for you, because you don't claim that God is all good in the same way they do. The next thing you said is, I actually believe that the world as it is right now is the best it has ever been. I agree with Steven Pinker, wrote the book, The Better Angels of Our Natures, and they showed that of all the time in history, this is probably the best for any human who's ever existed throughout all of history. And so that would be an interesting discussion for us to have another time as well. But yeah, if we want to wrap up, that's fine. I'd love for you to send me that stuff on politics you mentioned earlier. That would be really interesting. And thanks again for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, thanks for your time.
All right, see you later.
All right, take care.